Get out of here, Mom. Far away. Julian's words echoed in my ears like a death sentence. He had just handed me a check for $15,000 after selling my $4 million ranch behind my back. My own son, the person I trusted most in this world, was kicking me out of my own home as if I were an intruder. But what he didn't know was that I had known about his plans for a week and had already taken steps that would leave him speechless. $15,000? I asked with a smile he mistook for resignation. Is that all I'm worth to you after 40 years of building this place? Julian shrugged with a coldness that pierced my heart. Mom, you're getting too old to manage a ranch this big. I sold the property for $4 million. I invested the money in a business that will double our profits, and this is your share so you can live comfortably somewhere else. He showed me some papers with a forged signature that was supposedly mine. What Julian didn't know was that Owen had come to see me the week before, crying and trembling with rage. Mom, I heard Julian on the phone with a lawyer. They're planning to forge your signature and sell the ranch. He said he already has a buyer and that you're too senile to notice. My younger son had risked his relationship with his brother to save me from this betrayal, and thanks to him, I had been able to prepare for this moment. For 40 years, I had built this ranch with my own 2 hands. I arrived here a young widow with 2 small children and $100 in my pocket. I worked 18-hour days. My hands became covered in calluses, my back bent under the weight of feed sacks. But I never gave up. Every tree I planted, every fence I built, every animal I raised carried my sweat and my blood. This land wasn't just property, it was my soul, materialized into $4 million of honest work. Julian was always different from Owen. From a young age, he would ask how much money we made, what the ranch was worth, when it would be his. While I woke up at dawn to milk the cows, he slept in late. While I negotiated with international buyers, he was out partying with the money I gave him. I paid for his college, his car, his wedding, his failed business ventures, always believing that one day he would appreciate my sacrifice. But the only thing he saw was an old woman standing between him and his inheritance. Mom, you're 67 years old, he told me as he put the forged documents back in his briefcase. It's time you stop being stubborn and accept that you can't keep living alone in such a big place. With $15,000, you can rent an apartment in the city and live peacefully for the rest of your life. His tone was condescending, as if he were talking to a spoiled child. Besides, the buyer has already paid, and I've already invested the money. There's no turning back. I rose from my chair slowly, feeling every fiber of my being fill with a strength I hadn't felt in years. Julian thought he had defeated me, that he had taken everything I had fought for. But what he didn't know was that during that week, while he was celebrating his brilliant plan, I had been very busy with my lawyer, Claire, preparing the biggest surprise of his life. The same determination that had led me to build a $4 million empire would now serve to show him that no one, not even my own son, was going to humiliate me like that. All right, Julian, I said with a calm that reassured him. I accept your proposal. But before I go, I want us to have dinner together one last time. As a farewell. He smiled, believing he had finally broken my will. Of course, Mom. I'll book a table at the fanciest restaurant in the city. You deserve it. What Julian didn't know was that this dinner would be the stage where his world would completely fall apart. The photograph of the ranch rested on the table, showing 4 decades of honest work. Soon, my son would discover that stealing from a woman who built an empire with her own hands was not as easy as he had thought. That night, I couldn't sleep. Julian's words echoed in my head like a painful refrain. Get out of here, Mom, far away. I got up several times to walk through the house, touching each piece of furniture, each photograph, each object I had bought with my own effort. The ranch wasn't just my home, it was the physical testament to everything I had achieved against all odds. And now my own son wanted to erase me from history as if I had never existed. At dawn, I called Claire, my trusted lawyer. Margaret, I need you to come to my office immediately, she said with urgency in her voice. I have news about what you told me yesterday. I drove to the city with a racing heart, knowing my future depended on what Claire had discovered. During the drive, I remembered how I had met this extraordinary woman 3 years ago when Julian began pressuring me to put the ranch in his name. Claire was different from all the lawyers I had met. She didn't treat me like an ignorant old woman, but like a successful businesswoman who deserved respect. When I told her my suspicion about Julian's intentions, she didn't downplay my concerns. Margaret, cases of financial abuse against seniors are on the rise, and sadly, many involve close family members, she had told me with complete frankness. We need to protect your assets before it's too late. Sit down, Margaret, Claire said when I arrived at her office. Her serious face confirmed the news wasn't good. I investigated the documents Julian showed you yesterday. The signature is a forgery, obviously, but he has already filed those papers with the county records office. Officially, according to the system, the ranch is no longer yours. I felt the world collapse beneath my feet. But, Claire continued with a smile that restored my hope, what Julian doesn't know is that last week, when you came in alarmed by Owen's information, we already took preventive measures. Claire opened a thick folder full of official documents. Remember when you signed those papers last Monday? You not only transferred the ranch to an irrevocable trust, but you also established very specific clauses. According to these documents, you are the sole lifetime beneficiary of the trust, and only you can make decisions about the property. Furthermore, any attempt at a fraudulent sale is automatically void. Tears of relief streamed down my cheeks as Claire continued explaining. There's more, Claire said with satisfaction. We also installed hidden security cameras in your house last week and recorded the entire conversation yesterday when Julian gave you the check. We have complete evidence of his criminal intentions. She showed me the recordings on her computer. Seeing my own son speak so coldly about robbing me broke my heart, but it also filled me with a steely determination. And what about the money Julian claims to have invested? I asked with concern. Claire smiled in a way I hadn't seen before. That's Julian's problem, not yours. He sold something that didn't belong to him to a buyer who will soon discover he can't take possession of the property. When the buyer demands his $4 million back, Julian will have to explain where that money is. The poetic justice of the situation made me smile for the first time in days. I returned to the ranch feeling like a warrior prepared for battle. That afternoon, Julian called to confirm the farewell dinner. Mom, I've booked a table at the Summit Grill for tomorrow at 8. It will be a very special dinner, he said with that false sweetness that now nauseated me. Perfect, son. I have a surprise for you too, I replied with a smile he couldn't see over the phone. That night, I called Owen to tell him everything. Mom, I can't believe what Julian is doing, he said, his voice breaking. I knew he coveted the ranch, but I never thought he'd go this far. I explained the entire plan Claire and I had prepared. I want you to come to the restaurant tomorrow, but don't say anything to Julian. I need you to be a witness to everything that's about to happen. Owen agreed immediately, a mix of nervousness and admiration in his voice. The morning of the dinner, I woke up early to get ready. I chose my most elegant red dress, the one I had bought when I turned 60, to celebrate 4 decades of successful work. I did my makeup with special care, styled my hair as if for a party, and put on the pearl earrings my late husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. If Julian wanted a farewell dinner, I would give him one he would never forget. As I dressed, I remembered all the times Julian had tried to convince me to sell the ranch. Mom, you're not young enough for all this work anymore, he would constantly say. You could live comfortably in the city with the money from the sale. What he never understood was that the ranch wasn't work for me. It was my identity, my purpose, my connection to life. Every dawn among my trees, every afternoon feeding my animals, every night listening to the sounds of the countryside reminded me that I had built something beautiful and lasting. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Claire arrived at my house with a briefcase full of documents. Are you ready for this, Margaret? She asked as we reviewed the plan one last time. More than ready, I replied with a confidence I hadn't felt in weeks. Julian thinks he's giving me a farewell dinner, but in reality, it's going to be his wake-up call. Claire laughed heartily. I love working with you, Margaret. Not many women your age would have the courage to confront their own son this way. When I arrived at the Summit Grill, Julian was already waiting for me at an elegant table by the window. He was dressed in his best suit, as if celebrating a victory. Mom, you look beautiful, he said as he helped me sit down. I wanted this dinner to be special because I know it's going to be hard for you to adjust to your new life. The hypocrisy in his voice turned my stomach, but I maintained a serene smile. Thank you for being so considerate, Julian. I said as I unfolded the napkin on my lap. "I also have something very special prepared for tonight." He smiled, believing I had finally accepted my defeat. What he didn't know was that in the next few minutes, his world would crumble like a house of cards, and the woman he had underestimated for so many years was about to show him what she was really made of. Julian ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, as if celebrating the greatest victory of his life. "Mom, I want to toast to your new chapter," he said, as the waiter poured the golden liquid into our glasses. "I know it will be hard to adjust at first, but you'll see that living in the city will be much better for you." His smile was so fake it made me want to scream the truth at him right then and there. But I held back. The show was just beginning. "Of course, son," I replied, raising my glass with a serenity that calmed him. "To new beginnings." Julian toasted with me, unaware he was celebrating his own destruction. As I drank, I watched every detail of his face, wondering when exactly I had lost the sweet boy he once was, replaced by this cold, calculating man before me. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you," Julian began after several sips of wine. His tone turned more serious, more businesslike. "The buyer of the ranch wants to take possession next week. I need you to pack your personal things and be out by Friday." The coldness with which he spoke those words confirmed that to him, I was no longer his mother, but simply an obstacle to be removed. "So soon?" I asked, feigning surprise. "I thought I'd have more time to say goodbye to everything." Julian sighed impatiently, as if my feelings were a minor inconvenience. "Mom, don't make this harder than it already is. I've already found a perfect apartment for you downtown. It's furnished, has 24-hour security, and is close to the hospital in case you need medical attention." The way he talked about my future, as if I were an invalid old woman, filled me with an indignation I had to hide. As Julian continued to describe my new life, I saw Owen enter the restaurant out of the corner of my eye and sit discreetly at a table in the back. My younger son looked nervous but determined. We had agreed he would arrive half an hour after the dinner began to witness everything that was about to unfold. Seeing his worried face reminded me why I was doing this. I wasn't just defending my property. I was also protecting my good son from his brother's manipulations. "Julian, there's something I don't understand," I said when he finished speaking. "If the ranch was worth $4 million and you sold it for that price, where is the rest of the money? You only gave me $15,000. Julian took another sip of wine before answering, as if needing liquid courage for what he was about to say. "Mom, I invested that money in a business that will give us much greater returns," he explained with the forced patience of someone speaking to a child. "I bought shares in a tech company that's about to revolutionize the Latin American market. In 5 years, that $4 million will turn into $20 million. His enthusiasm was genuine, which made it all the more pathetic. My son had sold my entire life for a business dream that was probably as fake as his filial love. "And what if that business doesn't work out?" I asked with apparent innocence. "What will happen to the money from the ranch?" Julian laughed condescendingly. "Mom, you don't understand investments. I studied business administration. I have connections in the financial world. I know what I'm doing. Trust me." The irony of him asking for my trust after stealing everything I had was so immense, I almost laughed out loud. The waiter brought our main courses, but I could barely eat. Every bite tasted of betrayal. Every sip of wine reminded me I was dining with the enemy. Julian, on the other hand, ate with appetite, as if it were a celebratory meal. "Mom, I know this is hard for you," he said while cutting his steak, "but think of all you're going to gain. You won't have to wake up at dawn to milk cows anymore. You won't have to worry about the harvests. You won't have to deal with problematic employees. You'll be able to rest, as you deserve." What Julian didn't understand was that I didn't want to rest. Those early mornings, those worries, those daily challenges were what gave my life meaning. The ranch wasn't a burden to be eliminated, but the engine that kept me alive, active, and with purpose. "And what if I don't want to rest?" I asked softly. "What if I want to keep working my land until the last day of my life?" Julian stopped eating and looked at me with a mix of frustration and pity. "Mom, you're 67 years old. You're not at an age for that kind of physical labor anymore. You could get hurt, get sick, even die alone in that remote place. His concern sounded so false it made me want to throw up. Besides, the deal is done, the papers are signed, the money is invested. There's no going back. The papers are signed, I repeated slowly. What papers, Julian? He took the same documents from his briefcase that he had shown me the day before. These papers. Mom, here is your signature authorizing the sale of the ranch. He showed me the page where a signature appeared that was supposedly mine, but which I had never made. When did I sign this? I asked, my voice trembling. Julian looked me in the eye with a coldness that chilled my blood. Mom, you signed this a month ago when you came to visit me. Don't you remember? The lie was so blatant that for a moment I was speechless. My own son was accusing me of senility to justify his theft. You told me you no longer wanted the responsibility of managing the ranch, that you'd rather I take care of everything, he continued with complete naturalness. Julian, I said in a voice I barely recognized as my own, I never signed those papers. I never told you I wanted to sell the ranch. That is not my signature. His face hardened immediately. Mom, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You're starting to have memory problems. That's why you need to move to the city where you can get the medical attention you need. The manipulation was so brutal I felt a wave of nausea. Memory problems? I repeated in disbelief. Are you saying I'm senile? Julian sighed as if this were a conversation he'd had to have many times. Mom, it's not your fault. It's part of aging. But that's precisely why I made these decisions for you, to protect you from yourself. The cruelty of his words left me breathless. He hadn't just robbed me, he was now trying to convince me I was crazy. At that moment, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Claire, my lawyer, who had arrived punctually according to our plan. Good evening, Margaret, she said with a warm smile. I hope you don't mind me joining you. Julian looked at me, confused. Who is this woman, Mom? His tone was no longer condescending, but genuinely worried. Control of the situation was beginning to slip from his grasp. Julian, I said with a smile that was finally genuine. I'd like you to meet Claire. She's my lawyer. She has something very interesting to tell you about those papers you just showed me. Julian's face turned pale as Claire took a seat beside us. The farewell dinner was about to become the confrontation my son had never imagined. Julian's face changed completely when Claire sat at our table. His arrogant confidence morphed into visible nervousness, like a child caught in the middle of some mischief. Mom, what's going on here? He asked, in a voice that tried to sound firm but trembled slightly. Why did you bring your lawyer to a family dinner? His eyes darted between Claire and me, trying to figure out what was happening. Julian, allow me to introduce myself formally, Claire said with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm Dr. Claire Ramirez, an attorney specializing in estate law and elder protection. Your mother hired me last week after her younger son alerted her to certain plans you had regarding her property. The way she pronounced the word plans made Julian turn even paler. I don't know what you're talking about, Julian muttered, but his voice lacked the conviction he had shown minutes earlier. Mom simply authorized me to sell the ranch because she can no longer manage it alone. Everything is perfectly legal. Claire opened her briefcase and took out a thick folder full of documents. Legal? That's very interesting, Julian. Could you explain to me then why the signature on these documents doesn't match any of the authentic signatures your mother has made in the last 40 years? Julian took the papers Claire handed him, and I could see his hands shaking as he examined them. This must be a mistake, he stammered. Mom signed these documents voluntarily. I was there when she did it. Claire pulled another document from her folder. Are you referring to this occasion? She asked, showing him a photograph I hadn't seen before. The image clearly showed Julian sitting alone in his office, signing the papers himself. Where did you get that photo? Julian asked in a whisper. His face had lost all its color, and beads of sweat were starting to form on his forehead. Julian, did you really think you could commit document fraud without leaving a trace? Claire replied with a calm that brutally contrasted with my son's growing panic. We have security cameras in the building where you have your office. We also have recordings of the phone calls where you discussed this plan with your accomplice. What accomplice? I asked, genuinely surprised. This information was new to me. Claire glanced at me briefly before continuing. Javier Montenegro, the supposed buyer of the ranch, turns out to be Julian's partner in this scam. The plan was for Javier to buy the property at an inflated price. Then Julian would return the difference in cash, keeping the remaining $4 million for his investments. Julian clung to his wine glass as if it were a life raft in a storm. "That's not true," Julian murmured, but his denial sounded desperate. "Javier is a legitimate buyer. He wants the ranch to develop a tourist project." Claire smiled in a way that made me proud to have chosen her as my lawyer. "Julian, Javier Montenegro doesn't exist. It's a false identity you created using fraudulent documents. The bank account where he supposedly deposited the $4 million is in your name." The restaurant seemed to have faded away around us. Only the three of us existed at this table, and the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Mom?" Julian said, turning to me with pleading eyes. "You know me. I would never hurt you. There must be a misunderstanding." For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares, and my maternal heart softened slightly. But then I remembered the $15,000 check and his order to get far away from here. "Julian, is what Claire says true?" I asked in a voice that sounded strangely calm, even to me. "Did you really forge my signature to steal the ranch from me?" My older son looked me directly in the eye, and for a second, I thought he would tell the truth. But instead, his face hardened, and the cold, calculating man I had known in recent years reappeared. "Mom, you don't understand what's happening," Julian said with renewed arrogance. "Yes, maybe I took some liberties with the documents, but it was all for your own good. You no longer have the mental capacity to make important financial decisions. Someone had to protect the family assets before you did something senile and crazy." The cruelty of his words hit me like a physical slap. Claire intervened before I could respond. "Julian, are you aware that you have just confessed to committing document fraud, financial abuse of a senior, and forgery of official documents? Because all of this is being recorded." She pointed to a small digital recorder she had discreetly placed on the table. Julian realized he had fallen into a perfectly orchestrated trap. Furthermore, Claire continued relentlessly. "I want to inform you that the ranch could never have been legally sold because last week, your mother transferred it to an irrevocable trust. She is the sole lifetime beneficiary, and any subsequent sale is automatically void." Julian looked at me with an expression of absolute shock. "What does that mean?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "It means, my dear son," I said, finally finding my voice, "that not only can you not sell my ranch, but you now have a very big problem. The supposed buyer, Javier Montenegro, who according to Claire is you, has received a property that he legally cannot possess. Where are the $4 million you supposedly paid for it?" The realization of his situation hit Julian like a tsunami. I invested that money," Julian stammered. "It's in shares of a tech company. I can get it back." Claire shook her head. "Julian, we investigated that supposed investment. The company, Innovatech Americas, doesn't exist. It's another shell company you created to hide the money. Where is the $4 million, really?" Julian slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. At that moment, Owen approached our table. "Sorry to interrupt," he said in a tense voice, "but I think Julian should know that the bank has already frozen all his accounts for suspicious activity." Julian looked up at his younger brother with an expression of utter defeat. "Owen, you're involved in this too?" His voice sounded like that of a man who has just discovered his whole world has fallen apart. "Involved in protecting our mother from your betrayal?" "Yes, Julian, I'm very involved," Owen replied with a firmness I had rarely seen in him. "I was the one who told Mom about your plans. I was the one who convinced her to call Claire. And I was the one who contacted the banking authorities when I discovered the fraudulent transfers." Julian looked at his brother as if seeing him for the first time. "Why?" Julian asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you betray me?" Owen sat next to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "Julian, I didn't betray you. You betrayed our family when you decided to steal everything Mom had worked for over 40 years. You betrayed your own mother when you treated her like she was a senile nuisance." Tears began to roll down Owen's cheeks. The waiter approached nervously to ask if everything was all right, clearly uncomfortable with the tension emanating from our table. "Everything is perfectly fine," I said with a smile that probably looked ferocious. My family is just having a very necessary conversation about honesty and respect. The waiter quickly retreated, no doubt relieved not to be involved in our family drama. Julian looked up at me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes, but I did it all thinking about the family's future. Claire and I exchanged a look. After everything that had happened, my older son was still trying to manipulate me with excuses and justifications. The transformation of my sweet boy into this selfish, cruel man was complete, and there was no going back. Julian's tears didn't move me as he had hoped. For 40 years, I had learned to distinguish between genuine repentance and desperate manipulation. Julian, I said, my voice firmer than I felt, if you had really thought about the family's future, you would have spoken to me before making decisions about my life and my property. His sobs intensified, but I was no longer the mother who melted at her children's tears. Mom, please, Julian begged, clinging to my hand. I know I messed up, but we can fix all of this. I can return the money. I can cancel the investments. I can make everything go back to normal. His desperation was palpable, but it also revealed that he still didn't understand the magnitude of what he had done. Julian, where exactly is the money you supposedly invested? Claire asked with a patience I knew was purely professional. Julian wiped his eyes with his napkin and tried to recompose his business-like posture. The money is in an offshore investment account. It's a complex process, but I can access it in a few days. Claire pulled another folder from her briefcase. Julian, are you referring to the account in the Cayman Islands that you opened last week under the name JM Holdings? Because that account is also being investigated for money laundering. Julian's face fell completely. How is it possible you know all this? Julian muttered, more to himself than to us. Julian, when you decide to steal $4 million from your own mother, you automatically trigger multiple banking alert systems. Claire explained with a professional coolness that impressed me. International transfers of that magnitude without legitimate business justification are always investigated by financial authorities. Owen took Julian's hand with genuine sadness. Brother, how did we get to this point? When did you decide that money was more important than our mother? Julian looked up at Owen with a mix of resentment and desperation. You don't understand, Owen. You were always the favorite son, the one who never had to worry about money. I'm the oldest. I should have inherited the ranch automatically. The favorite son? I repeated in disbelief. Julian, I treated you both exactly the same. I gave you the same opportunities, the same education, the same love. Julian let out a bitter laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. The same love, Mom? Owen always got to do what he wanted. He went off to study art, married whoever he wanted, never had to prove anything. I had to study business because you said someone had to understand business to help you with the ranch. The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. For all these years, Julian had harbored a resentment I had never perceived. Julian, I never forced you to study business. You told me you wanted to do it because you were interested in business. Julian shook his head violently. I wanted to study music, Mom. I wanted to be a composer. But you needed someone who understood numbers and contracts, so I sacrificed my dreams for the family. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. Owen looked at me in surprise, clearly unaware of this version of the story. Claire watched everything with professional interest, probably accustomed to family conflicts revealing deep wounds during these types of confrontations. Julian, I finally said, if you felt forced to study something you didn't want, why did you never tell me? What for? Julian responded bitterly. The ranch was always your #1 priority. Your plants, your animals, your crops, we were secondary. Owen understood that and went to live his own life. I stayed, waiting for the moment you would finally acknowledge my sacrifice. His words hurt me more than I wanted to admit because there was some truth to them. Julian, it's true the ranch was very important to me, I admitted honestly. It was my way of securing a future for both of you. But that doesn't justify you stealing everything I worked for over 40 years. Julian covered his face with his hands. I didn't want to steal from you, Mom. I wanted you to finally see me as your partner, as your rightful heir. I wanted to prove that I could multiply the value of the ranch through smart investments. Claire intervened gently. Julian, do you understand there are legal ways to express those aspirations? You could have proposed a business plan to your mother. You could have asked to be included as a partner in the ranch's operation. You could have suggested investing part of the profits in other projects. Julian looked up with an expression that mixed desperation and frustration. I tried, Julian said, his voice breaking. For years, I proposed ideas to expand the business, to modernize operations, to diversify investments. But Mom always told me the ranch was fine as it was, that it didn't need changes. I realized Julian was right about this. I had been very conservative with my decisions, perhaps too resistant to change. But that didn't give you the right to make unilateral decisions about my property, I said firmly. If you wanted changes, you should have insisted more. You should have found ways to convince me, not to deceive me. Julian nodded slowly, as if he were finally understanding the gravity of his actions. I know, Mom, I know, and I hate myself for it. But when I saw the investment opportunity in Innovatech, I thought I could prove my worth without having to ask your permission. Julian, Owen intervened gently. Innovatech doesn't exist. Claire already explained that. What did you really invest the money in? Julian was silent for several minutes, clearly debating internally whether to tell the truth or continue lying. Finally, he sighed deeply. I invested it in cryptocurrency, he admitted in a barely audible voice. I thought I could triple the money in a few months and give Mom back her ranch, plus a spectacular profit. The confession landed on the table like a bomb. Cryptocurrency? I repeated in disbelief. Julian, you gambled $4 million of my money on cryptocurrency without my knowledge? Claire leaned forward with professional interest. Julian, could you be more specific? What kind of cryptocurrencies? Through what platform? Julian looked like a man who had just admitted to his own financial suicide. I invested in several new cryptocurrencies that promised extraordinary returns, Julian mumbled. Luna Coin, Galaxy Token, a few others whose names I can't remember. The investment advisor assured me they were unique opportunities. Claire and Owen exchanged a horrified look. Julian, Owen said, his voice trembling, those are classic crypto scams. How much money is left? Julian completely slumped in his chair. According to my last statement, there's about $300,000 left. The rest was lost when several of the coins collapsed last week. The silence that followed was absolute. 4 million reduced to 300,000 in a matter of days. The magnitude of the loss was so great that my brain refused to fully process it. 300,000, I repeated slowly. Julian, you lost $3,700,000 in 1 week? Julian nodded without looking up, like a child who has just broken the most valuable vase in the house. I thought it was a temporary market correction. The advisor told me all investments have initial volatility. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, probably calculating the legal implications of this revelation. Julian, do you have the documents for these investments? Contracts, receipts, communications with this supposed advisor? Claire asked, with an urgency she hadn't shown before. Julian rummaged through his briefcase and pulled out several wrinkled papers. Here are some documents, but most of the transactions were digital. Claire examined the papers quickly, her expression growing increasingly somber. Julian, these are not legitimate investment documents, Claire said after reviewing everything. These are forms from a cryptocurrency pyramid scheme. Not only did you lose your mother's money, but you were the victim of massive fraud. Julian looked up with a spark of hope. Does that mean I can get the money back? Claire shook her head sadly. It means the scammers have already disappeared with the money, and the chances of recovery are practically nil. The reality of the situation finally settled over all of us. Julian had not only betrayed my trust and stolen my property, but he had irreversibly lost a fortune that represented 4 decades of work. The poetic justice was brutal. The son who wanted to prove his financial superiority had fallen for the most basic scam in the digital world. The devastation on Julian's face was complete. He had not only lost his family's respect, but had financially destroyed what he so desperately wanted to possess. Mom, he murmured, his voice barely audible. What am I going to do now? I have no way to pay you back. My house is mortgaged, my credit cards are maxed out, and now the authorities have frozen my accounts. For the first time that night, I saw genuine vulnerability instead of calculated manipulation. Julian, that is no longer my responsibility, I told him with a firmness that surprised even myself. You made these decisions without consulting me, assuming you had a right over my life and my property. Now you have to face the consequences of your actions. Claire nodded in agreement as she organized the documents she had just examined. Margaret is right, Julian. You are a 42-year-old adult. The decisions you made were yours, and so are the consequences. Owen took his brother's hand with genuine compassion. Julian, I'll help you in any way I can, but first, you need to understand that what you did was terribly wrong. Julian squeezed Owen's hand as if it were his last lifeline. Are you going to report me to the police, Mom? He asked, terror in his eyes. The question hit me hard because, despite everything, he was still my son. Claire answered before I could. Julian, technically, you've already been reported. The banks automatically reported the suspicious transactions to the financial authorities. Document fraud, forgery of signatures, and financial abuse of a senior are serious crimes that are prosecuted automatically. Julian turned as white as a sheet. Does that mean I'm going to jail? It depends on many factors, Claire explained professionally. Your cooperation with the investigation, your willingness to return what's left of the money, and your mother's decision on whether she wants to proceed with additional civil charges. All eyes turned to me. The most difficult decision of my life was in my hands. I could send my own son to prison or find another way to seek justice. Julian, I want you to listen to me very clearly, I said after several minutes of tense silence. What you did not only stole money from me, but it destroyed the trust I had placed in you for 42 years. You treated me as if I were a senile old woman who deserved neither respect nor consideration. Julian began to sob again, but this time it seemed genuine. Mom, I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to impress you. Impress me by robbing me? I asked in disbelief. Impress me by treating me like a nuisance to be removed? Julian shook his head desperately. No, Mom. I wanted to impress you by multiplying the money, giving you back the ranch with improvements, proving that I could be the successful son you always wanted. His words revealed a deep distortion of reality that genuinely worried me. Julian, I never wanted you to be different from who you were, I said sadly. I just wanted you to be honest, hardworking, and to respect others. Financial success was never my priority for either of you. Owen nodded vigorously. Mom always told us that the important thing was to be good people, not rich people. Julian looked at his brother as if he had just heard this for the first time. Claire cleared her throat gently to get our attention. Margaret, we need to discuss the next legal steps. Julian will have to face the criminal charges regardless of what you decide, but you can influence the civil penalties. I took a moment to process all the information. My son had committed serious crimes, had lost a fortune, and now his future depended partly on my decisions. Claire, what are my options? I finally asked. You can proceed with a full civil lawsuit, seeking recovery of all damages plus additional penalties. Or you can negotiate a settlement that includes the return of the remaining $300,000 plus a payment plan for the rest, in exchange for not proceeding with some of the civil charges. Julian looked at me with desperate pleading in his eyes. And if I choose the full lawsuit? I asked. Julian would lose everything he has, his house, his car, any remaining assets. Additionally, the penalties could include punitive damages that would keep him in debt for life. The severity of the options struck me. Part of me wanted Julian to pay completely for what he had done, but another part remembered the little boy he once was. Mom, please, Julian begged, tears streaming down his cheeks. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise I will do everything I can to make it up to you. I will work day and night. I will sell everything I have. I will find ways to pay back every dollar I lost. His promises sounded sincere, but I had learned to distrust easy words. Julian, how can I trust your promises after what you've done? I asked him directly. How do I know this isn't another manipulation to avoid the consequences of your actions? Julian wiped his eyes and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in years. Because I now understand that I lost the most important thing I had, your respect and your trust. Money can be recovered, but that, maybe never. Owen intervened gently. Mom, can I suggest something? I nodded, valuing his perspective. What if we give Julian a chance to prove he's serious, but with very strict conditions? Claire raised her eyebrows with professional interest. What kind of conditions do you have in mind, Owen? Julian immediately returns the $300,000 that are left, sells his house and his car to generate more restitution funds, and agrees to work on the ranch without a salary until he is compensated for a significant part of the damage, Owen proposed. Furthermore, all of this would be legally supervised with monthly reports to Claire on his financial progress. Julian nodded desperately at the proposal. That's interesting, Claire said. But we would need to add clear consequences if Julian fails to comply with the terms of the agreement. And we would also need guarantees that he won't be able to access any of Margaret's assets again without legal supervision. Julian seemed willing to accept any condition that would save him from complete ruin. And what about the family relationship? I asked, getting to the heart of the matter. How do we rebuild the trust that you destroyed, Julian? This question was more important to me than any financial consideration. Julian took several minutes before answering, clearly thinking deeply about his response. Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for another chance, Julian finally said. But if you allow me to work on the ranch not as your heir or your partner, but as your employee maybe over the next few years, I can prove that I am capable of respecting your work and your authority. His humility seemed genuine, but I knew that words were easy when someone was desperate. Julian, the work on the ranch is hard, I warned him. It means waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, working under the sun, getting your hands dirty, doing tasks you consider beneath your college education. Are you really willing to do that? Julian nodded vigorously. Mom, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to earn back your respect, even if it takes the rest of my life. Claire took notes as we spoke. If we decide to proceed with a supervised agreement, we'll need to establish very specific terms. Restitution amount, payment schedule, working conditions, consequences for non-compliance, and a clearly defined probationary period. Julian immediately agreed to all the legal requirements Claire mentioned. There's one more condition, I finally said, feeling it was time to set the most important boundary. Julian, if you accept this agreement, you can never again question my decisions about the ranch or pressure me to make changes I don't want. My property is mine, and my decisions are final. Julian nodded solemnly. I understand completely, Mom. I will not cross those boundaries again. The restaurant had almost completely emptied while we were having this conversation that would change our lives forever. The waiter discreetly approached to ask if we needed anything else, clearly hoping we would finish soon. Just a few more minutes, I told him kindly. The most important decisions of our lives could not be rushed for the convenience of a restaurant. I made a decision that would change our lives forever. Julian, I am going to give you one chance to redeem yourself, but it will be on my terms, and with complete legal supervision, I announced with a firmness that resonated across the table. You have exactly 1 year to prove you can be the son I raised, not the con man you became. Julian looked at me with a mixture of relief and terror, understanding this was likely his last chance. Claire, prepare a contract that includes everything we've discussed, I continued. Julian will immediately return the remaining $300,000, sell all his assets to generate additional restitution funds, and work on my ranch without a salary for 12 months. Claire nodded as she took detailed notes. Furthermore, I want monthly reports on his progress, and if he violates any term of the agreement, we will immediately proceed with the full civil lawsuit. Julian wiped away his tears and looked me directly in the eye. Mom, I accept all the terms. I promise you I will work harder than I have ever worked in my entire life. His voice trembled, but there was a determination in it I hadn't heard in years. But I need you to understand something, Julian, I said sternly. This is not a reconciliation. This is a supervised work opportunity. Trust will be earned day by day, and it could take years to rebuild what you destroyed in one night. Owen took his brother's hand, his own emotion palpable. Julian, I'm proud of Mom for giving you this chance, and I hope you value it as it deserves. Julian nodded solemnly at his younger brother. Owen, thank you for protecting Mom when I was betraying her. You're a better man than I am, and I hope to learn from you during this process. The genuine humility in Julian's voice gave me the first real hope that maybe, just maybe, we could heal this family wound. Now let's talk about the specific conditions, Claire said, organizing her documents. Julian, tomorrow morning, you need to transfer the remaining $300,000 to a restitution account that I will manage. Then you have 30 days to sell your house, your car, and any other valuable assets. Julian nodded without protest. Where will I live during this period? He asked, with genuine concern. On the ranch with me, I replied, surprising him. But not in the main house. There's a small cabin where the seasonal workers stay. You will live there under the same conditions as any employee on the ranch. Julian swallowed nervously. With no special privileges for being your son? I shook my head firmly. No special privileges. In fact, with greater supervision for being the son who betrayed my trust. Claire continued laying out the legal terms. Julian, you also need to understand that during this 1-year probation, you will not be able to make any significant financial decisions without supervision. No investments, no loans, no new bank accounts. Julian accepted every restriction without protest. I understand. I need to prove I can handle basic responsibilities before being trusted with important decisions. There's something else, I added seriously. Julian, during this year, you are going to learn every aspect of the ranch work. You will milk cows, you will plant pecans, you will repair fences, you will clean stables. You will physically understand what it means to build something with your own hands. Julian nodded vigorously. Mom, I'm ready for that. I want to truly understand what you've done all these years. Owen smiled for the first time all night. Julian, I think this work is going to change your perspective on a lot of things. Julian looked at his brother with curiosity. What do you mean? Owen reflected for a moment before answering. When you work the land with your own hands, you understand that money isn't just numbers in a bank account. Every dollar represents sweat, effort, sacrifice. Maybe that will help you value what Mom built. You also need to understand, I continued, that your relationship with me will fundamentally change. You are no longer my son who can ask for favors or expect special treatment. You are my employee who has to earn every opportunity he receives. Julian nodded solemnly. I understand, Mom. I know I lost the right to be treated as your son when I betrayed you. I hope I can earn that place back over time. Claire closed her folder with satisfaction. Margaret, I believe this agreement is fair yet firm. It gives Julian a chance to redeem himself while completely protecting your interests. I turned to Julian with the most serious expression I could muster. Julian, I want you to understand that if you fail in this agreement, there will not be a third chance. I will proceed with the full lawsuit and cut off all relations with you permanently. I understand completely, Mom, Julian responded, his voice broken but determined. This is my last chance to be your son again, and I will not waste it. His words sounded sincere, but I knew that actions would be the only true indicator of his intentions. Good. Then we start tomorrow. Be at the ranch at 5 o'clock in the morning, ready to work. The waiter approached again, clearly needing to close the restaurant. Excuse me, but we need to close in 15 minutes, he informed us politely. Claire began to pack her documents. Perfect. I think we've covered everything necessary for tonight. We'll meet at my office tomorrow to sign the official agreement documents. Julian nodded nervously, probably processing everything he had agreed to. As we stood up from the table, Owen hugged Julian with tears in his eyes. Brother, I'm proud of you for accepting this opportunity. I know it's going to be hard, but I think it's exactly what you need. Julian returned the hug with intensity. Owen, thank you for not giving up on me despite what I did. I need you to help me stay on the right path this year. Julian, I finally said, there's one more thing you need to understand. During these 12 months, you're not just going to work to compensate for the money you lost. You're going to work to rebuild the respect you destroyed, the trust you betrayed, and the family relationship you almost ruined forever. Julian looked at me with a humility I hadn't seen since he was a child. Mom, I know I don't deserve this chance, but I promise I will do everything possible to be worthy of it. Claire walked us to the restaurant door. Margaret, I'm impressed by your wisdom in handling this situation. You're giving Julian a chance to redeem himself, but with complete legal protections for yourself. I thanked Claire for all her professional help. I couldn't have handled this without your legal expertise. I'll see you tomorrow for the official documents." When we stepped out into the cool night air, I felt as though I had just emerged from an epic battle. Julian's betrayal had been devastating, but at least now there was a path forward. "Julian," I said before we parted ways, "remember, tomorrow at 5 o'clock sharp, you'll be working like any other employee on the ranch. Don't be late." Julian nodded solemnly. "I won't fail you, Mom. This time, I won't fail you." Owen offered to drive me home, but I preferred to drive alone to process everything that had happened. On the way back to the ranch, I reflected on the most intense night of my life. My son had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, but I had shown that a 67-year-old woman could defend herself and set firm boundaries. The future was uncertain, but at least now it was on my terms. When I arrived at the ranch and saw my lands bathed in the moonlight, I felt a deep satisfaction. This land was still mine. My 40 years of work were protected, and maybe, just maybe, I would have the chance to get my lost son back. But this time, it would be under my rules and on my terms. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands was not going to be defeated by anyone's betrayal, not even her own son's. 3 months after that night that changed our lives forever, I woke up, as always, at 4:30 in the morning. The alarm clock was no longer necessary. My body had developed an internal clock after 4 decades of early mornings on the ranch. As I dressed, I heard footsteps in the yard outside. Julian was already awake, preparing for another day of work that would start promptly at 5. The first few days had been brutal for him. His hands, accustomed to holding documents and calculators, were covered in blisters after the first week of physical labor. His back, which had never carried more than a briefcase, ached from lifting sacks of feed and heavy tools. But to my surprise, Julian never complained once. Every morning, he showed up on time, ready to learn and work. "Good morning, Mom," Julian greeted me when I stepped out of the main house. His appearance had changed drastically in these 3 months. His skin was tanned by the sun, his hands calloused, his muscles developed from physical labor. But more important than his external transformation was the change in his attitude. There was no arrogance in his voice anymore, only genuine respect and a humility he was learning day by day. "Good morning, Julian," I replied with the professional neutrality I had maintained these past months. It wasn't coldness, but the necessary distance between an employer and her employee. "Today we're going to check the north sector of the pecan orchard. The trees need pruning and fertilization." Julian nodded and went to get the necessary tools without me having to tell him. He had learned the routine quickly. As we walked toward the orchard, I watched how Julian interacted with the trees. At first, he treated them like objects to be manipulated to complete a task, but gradually, he had begun to understand that each tree was a living being that required specific care and attention. "This tree looks sick," he commented, pointing to a pecan tree with yellowish leaves. His observation was correct. "What do you think might be causing that?" I asked. Testing his learning, Julian moved closer to examine the tree. It could be too much water, a lack of nutrients, or maybe some kind of pest. His answer showed he had been paying attention during the lessons I had given him on plant care. "Very good. And what would you do to fix it?" Julian thought for a moment before answering. "First, I'd check the soil drainage to make sure there's no waterlogging. Then I'd examine the leaves for signs of pests or diseases. Finally, I'd adjust the fertilization based on what I find." I was impressed by the methodology of his response. He was learning to think like a farmer, not just follow orders. During these 3 months, Claire had religiously monitored Julian's progress. He had complied with all the conditions of the agreement. He transferred the remaining $300,000, sold his house and car, and turned over all the additional funds generated. The total recovered so far was about $550,000, a fraction of what was lost, but a significant start. "Mom, can I ask you a personal question?" Julian said as we pruned the pecan trees. It was the first time in 3 months he had dared to start a conversation that wasn't strictly about work. "You can ask," I replied, keeping my focus on the pruning. "Will you ever be able to forgive me for what I did?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I stopped and looked at him directly. "Julian, forgiveness isn't something that's given out like a prize for good behavior. It's something that's built day by day, decision by decision, Action by action. Julian nodded solemnly, clearly understanding there were no easy answers. You're proving that you can be reliable in daily tasks, but deep trust takes years to rebuild. I understand, Julian replied sincerely. I just wanted you to know that every day I work here, I understand better what I destroyed when I betrayed you. This land isn't just money or property. It's your life, your identity, your legacy. His words moved me because they reflected an understanding that had been absent for years. I'm glad you finally understand that, I told him softly. That afternoon, Owen came to visit, as he did every weekend. The dynamic between the brothers had completely changed. Owen no longer had to protect me from Julian. Now he could relate to him as a brother who was genuinely trying to change. How do you feel after 3 months of physical labor? Owen asked Julian as we had dinner. Tired but satisfied, Julian answered honestly. It's strange, but there's something gratifying in seeing the physical result of your work at the end of the day. Owen smiled. That's exactly what Mom always tried to teach us when we were kids. Julian nodded wistfully. You're right. It's a shame it took me so long to understand. During dinner, Julian told me about his interactions with the other ranch hands. At first, they looked at me with suspicion, he admitted. They knew I was your son, and they probably knew something had happened. But gradually, when they saw I was willing to do the same work they did, they started to accept me. I was glad to know that Julian was earning respect through actions, not titles. There's something I want to discuss with you, I told Julian after dinner. Claire informed me that the legal process has progressed well. The authorities found some of the scammers who tricked you with the cryptocurrencies. Julian sat up with interest. Does that mean we can recover more money? I nodded cautiously. Possibly, but it also means you will need to testify against them. Julian didn't hesitate for a second. I'll do whatever it takes to help recover the money I lost because of my stupidity. His immediate willingness to cooperate showed me that he was truly committed to making things right. Good. Claire will arrange the necessary meetings with the prosecutors. Julian nodded with determination. That night, after Owen left and Julian retired to his cabin, I sat on my porch to reflect on the last 3 months. Julian's transformation had been remarkable, but I knew that 3 months was just the beginning. Real changes, deep changes in a person's character, take years to solidify. However, for the first time since that devastating night at the restaurant, I felt something akin to hope. Julian was proving he could be disciplined, humble, and hardworking. More importantly, he was proving he could respect my authority and follow instructions without questioning or manipulating. These were the basic foundations upon which we might one day rebuild a family relationship. The next day was Sunday, traditionally a day of rest on the ranch, but Julian had developed the habit of using Sundays to study the technical aspects of agriculture. Books on cattle ranching, manuals on pecan cultivation, articles on modern irrigation techniques. Seeing my son voluntarily educating himself about my work filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. Julian, I said when I found him reading under a pecan tree, I want to ask you a question. He looked up from his book attentively. What are your plans for after this probationary year ends? Julian closed the book and looked at me seriously. Mom, if you'll let me, I would like to continue working on the ranch, not as your privileged son, but as an employee who has earned his place. His answer surprised me. You don't miss your old life? Your office, your suits, your business meetings? Julian shook his head firmly. That life was built on empty ambitions and irresponsible decisions. This life, though simpler, feels more real, more honest. His words reflected a maturity I had never seen in him before. Julian, there are still 9 months left in your probationary period, I reminded him. A lot can change in that time. Julian nodded understandingly. I know, Mom, but I want you to know that with each passing day, I'm more convinced that this is the right path for me. The sincerity in his voice made me feel that maybe, just maybe, I had gotten back the son I thought I had lost forever. That afternoon, as I watched Julian repair a fence under the evening sun, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride for the transformation I was witnessing, caution for the wounds that were still healing, and hope for the future we might build together. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the possibility of redemption was manifesting itself day by day in my son's honest work. A year after that dinner that changed our lives forever, I woke in the early morning with a different feeling in my chest. Today marked the exact end of Julian's probationary period, and for the first time in 12 months, I felt genuinely optimistic about our family's future. The familiar sound of footsteps in the yard confirmed that Julian was already awake, preparing for another day of work that had completely transformed his character. During these 12 months, Julian had met every single condition of the agreement without a single fault. He had worked from dawn till dusk, had learned every aspect of the ranch's operation, and had shown a dedication I never thought he possessed. More importantly, he had recovered a total of $800,000 through the sales of his properties and cooperation with the authorities to pursue the scammers. "Good morning, Mom." Julian greeted me as I left the house. His physical transformation was remarkable, tanned by the sun, muscular from the work, with calloused hands that showed a year of honest labor. But his emotional transformation was even more impressive. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a genuine humility and a deep respect for the work and for me. "Good morning, Julian," I replied, but this time my voice had a warmth that had been absent for months. "Today is a special day." Julian nodded with a nervous smile. "Yes, Mom. My year of probation is up." I could see the anxiety in his eyes, wondering what decision I had made about his future. "I want you to know that you have surpassed all my expectations," I told him sincerely. During the morning, we worked together in the fields as we had done hundreds of times over the past year, but this time I watched every gesture of Julian's with new eyes. The gentle way he treated the animals, the meticulous care with which he pruned the trees, the patience with which he explained farming techniques to new workers. This was the man I had hoped he would become for 42 years. At noon, Claire arrived at the ranch for our scheduled meeting. Throughout the year, she had monitored Julian's progress monthly, and her reports had been consistently positive. "Margaret, in all my years as a lawyer specializing in family cases, I have rarely seen a transformation as complete as Julian's," she told me, as we reviewed the final documents. "Julian has met every term of the agreement," Claire continued. "He has returned $800,000 of the $4 million lost, has worked without a salary for 12 months, and has demonstrated a genuine change in his character and values." Julian sat with us, clearly nervous to hear my final decision about his future on the ranch and in our family. "Julian," I said, looking him directly in the eye, "a year ago, you betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. You stole my trust, forged my signature, and tried to take everything I had worked for over 4 decades. Julian looked down, clearly ashamed by the reminder of his past actions. "But during this year, you have shown that you are capable of changing. You have worked harder than any employee I've had in 40 years. You have learned to respect this land and to understand what it means to build something with your own hands. You have shown humility, dedication, and a genuine commitment to doing things right." The emotion in Julian's voice was visible as he listened to my words. "Therefore," I continued, "I have decided to offer you a permanent position on the ranch. Not as my automatic heir, but as my junior partner, with a fair salary and the opportunity to participate in operational decisions." Julian looked at me in disbelief, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Really, Mom? You trust me enough for that?" "Julian, complete trust will take years to rebuild," I explained honestly. "But you have shown that you deserve a chance to continue proving yourself. However, there are conditions." Claire pulled out a new contract we had prepared. "You will continue under legal supervision for the next 3 years, and any significant financial decision requires my explicit approval." Julian immediately accepted all the conditions without even reading them. "Mom, just the fact that you're letting me stay is more than I deserve." His tears of gratitude moved me deeply. "Julian, we all deserve second chances when we are willing to work for them." I extended my hand, and when he took it, I felt I was finally getting my son back. That afternoon, we called Owen to share the news. His joy was immediate and genuine. "Julian, I'm so proud of you. You've shown that you can change when you really commit to it." The 3 of us hugged for the first time in over a year, and for the first time since that terrible night, our family felt whole again. During dinner, Julian asked me a question I had been expecting. "Mom, will you ever be able to completely forgive me for what I did?" I reflected carefully before answering. Julian, forgiveness isn't a single event, it's a process. Every day you prove that you've changed. Every honest decision you make, every moment of respect you show me, contributes to that forgiveness. I no longer feel the anger I felt a year ago, I continued. I no longer feel the betrayal like an open wound. What I feel now is hope. Hope that you have truly found your way. Hope that we can build a new and better relationship on the foundation of mutual respect. Julian nodded with tears in his eyes, clearly moved by my words. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on the most challenging year of my life. My son had betrayed me in the most brutal way possible, but he had also given me the opportunity to demonstrate my own strength. I had set firm boundaries, demanded respect, and created the conditions for a true reconciliation based on actions, not empty words. The next day, Julian would officially begin as my junior partner on the ranch. He would have a salary, real responsibilities, and the chance to genuinely contribute to the success of the operation he had tried to steal a year earlier. The poetic justice was perfect. The son who wanted to inherit the ranch without working for it would now have to earn it day by day with his honest effort. As I fell asleep, I listened to the familiar sounds of the ranch that had been my home for 4 decades. The crickets chirping, the wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the cattle. But there was a new sound that filled me with peace. Julian's footsteps in his cabin, preparing for another day of honest work. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands had shown that no one, not even her own son, could defeat her when she was determined to defend what she had built. But more importantly, she had shown that motherly love, combined with firm limits and clear consequences, could create the conditions for genuine redemption. Julian had lost $4 million of my money, but he had found something much more valuable. He had found his soul, his purpose, and his way back home. And I had recovered not only my assets, but the hope that my family could heal and grow stronger than before. Sometimes the most painful betrayals become the most powerful opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and genuine transformation. The ranch that had been the scene of the greatest betrayal of my life would now be the witness to the most beautiful redemption I could imagine. And for the first time in a year, I fell asleep with a smile on my face, knowing the future was full of new and hopeful possibilities. My left arm rested on the armrest, still aching after 3 days. The white cast was a constant reminder of the brutality of Megan, my daughter-in-law, from when I told her I had no intention of handing over the $4 million I had won in the lottery. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had watched Theo grow up for so many years, when I heard their voices approaching from the yard. "Beatrice, open the door," Theo shouted, banging hard. His knuckles echoed against the wood like hammer blows. Megan was with him, her heels clicking against the tiles of my entryway. They were coming for the second time this week. The first had been when Megan fractured my arm for refusing to sign the papers they had brought from the bank. Now they were back, and I knew it wasn't a family visit. I rose from the armchair with difficulty, trying to protect my injured arm. At my 69 years, every movement cost me twice as much after the beating. I shuffled towards the door, my heart beating like a drum in my chest. "Theo, son, what do you want now?" I asked through the closed door. I didn't want to open it for them, not after what had happened. "Open up already, you stubborn old woman," Megan roared from the other side. "We've come to talk to you seriously. We're not leaving until you sign those papers." Her voice had that acidity that made my blood run cold. She was the same woman I had met 5 years ago when Theo introduced her to me as his girlfriend. Back then, she had seemed sweet, polite. She had called me Moma Beatrice with such affection that I thought I would finally have a daughter. I opened the door with my right hand, keeping my left arm pressed against my body. Theo entered without waiting for an invitation, pushing me aside. Megan followed him, her eyes gleaming with that greed I already knew so well. They settled in my living room as if it were their own, Theo sinking into my new sofa, the one I had bought with my first retirement check. "Mom, we've come to resolve this once and for all," Theo said without looking me in the eye. He was 32 years old, but in that moment he seemed like a stranger. His voice sounded cold, calculating. "Megan is 5 months pregnant. We need that money to buy the big house, to start the business, to secure your grandchild's future." He said it like it was an order, not a request. "Theo, I already explained to you that I can help you, but I'm not going to hand over all the money, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. It's $4 million. I also have the right to live with dignity in my final years. I stood by the door, ready to run if necessary. Fear ran through my veins like poison. Megan shot up from the sofa like a coiled spring. Dignity? What dignity? You've already lived, Beatrice. You've had your chance to be happy, to buy things, to travel. Now it's our turn. She approached me with her fists clenched. That money doesn't belong to you. An old woman like you doesn't know what to do with so much money. You're just going to waste it on medicine and stupid things. Megan, please, calm down. I tried to reason with her. You can have half. $2 million is more than enough to start a new life. But my words only enraged her more. She stood in front of me with her hands on her hips, her pregnant belly jutting out like a threat. I don't want half. I want all of it, she screamed in my face. Her breath smelled of cigarettes and hatred. My son is going to grow up in a mansion. He's going to go to the best schools, and you're not going to screw up our plans with your miserable old lady selfishness. She pushed me so hard that I stumbled and fell back into the armchair. The fractured arm moved and I screamed in pain. Megan, that's enough, I exclaimed through tears. But Theo didn't move from the sofa. He didn't defend me. He just looked at me with contempt, as if I were the problem. Theo, son, please, control your wife, I begged him. He was my blood, my only son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died when he was 8. No, Mom. Megan is right, Theo said, getting up slowly. You don't understand the opportunity you have to do something good for your family. I sacrificed my whole life for you. I worked since I was 16 to help with the bills. I never went on a trip, never had a serious girlfriend until Megan, all because I had to take care of you. His words cut me like knives. Theo, I never asked you to sacrifice yourself. I worked double shifts so you wouldn't lack anything, I reminded him, my voice breaking. I sold my car, I pawned my mother's jewelry, I turned down Mr. Morris when he proposed because you said you didn't want a stepfather. Each word came out with pain, remembering all the sacrifices I had made for him. That was your obligation, Megan roared. Mothers sacrifice for their children. But children also have the right to receive an inheritance when their parents die or when they're old and useless. She slapped me with her left hand. The sound echoed through the living room. The sting of her fingers burned on my cheek. Theo approached me with a coldness that chilled my blood. Look, Mom, I'm going to explain this to you one more time. Tomorrow, you're coming with us to the bank and transferring all the money to my account. Everything. Not half, not a part, everything. If you don't, Megan and I will make sure the rest of your life is a living hell. His threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. I can't do that, Theo. I'm not going to hand over all my money, I replied, trying to sound brave, though inside I was trembling. That's when Megan completely lost control. She grabbed me by the neck with one hand and took my fractured arm with the other. Then we're going to teach you what happens to stubborn old women who don't understand the easy way. She twisted my arm with such force that the cast shifted and I screamed like a wounded animal. The pain shot through me from my shoulder to the tips of my fingers. Sign those papers, or next time I'll break your other arm. She let me go and I fell to the floor like a dirty rag. Theo looked down at me, without a hint of compassion in his eyes. You have until 10 o'clock in the morning tomorrow to decide, Mom. Either you come with us to the bank and sign everything, or Megan and I will make sure you learn things the hard way. They headed for the door as if nothing had happened. Oh, and Beatrice, Megan shouted from the entrance. Tomorrow when we go to the bank, you're going to say you're giving us this money out of love for your grandchild. You're going to smile and act like the happy grandmother you should be. Because if you don't, I swear on this child I'm carrying that I will make you suffer until the day you die. The door slammed shut with a thud that shook the whole house. I was left lying on the floor of my own living room, crying like a lost child. My arm throbbed with pain, my cheek burned from the slap, but what hurt the most was my heart. My own son, the reason for my existence for 32 years, had threatened me. He had betrayed me for money. Tomorrow you're going to find out, my son, that your mother is not as helpless as you think, I muttered through my tears, wiping the blood from my lip with my right hand. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling as tears rolled down my cheeks. My arm throbbed, and every movement reminded me of Megan's cruelty. But more than the physical pain, what broke my soul was remembering how I had gotten here, how my Theo, my adored child, had become this cold man who threatened me for money. I closed my eyes and transported myself 24 years back, when Theo was 8, and his father died in that horrible construction accident. I was left alone with a small child, with no savings, no family to help me. I worked during the day at the textile factory, and at night I cleaned offices. I would get home at 2 in the morning and have to wake up at 6 to make Theo's breakfast and take him to school. I remember that Christmas when he was 10. All his classmates talked about the gifts Santa Claus had brought them. New bikes, video games, brand-name clothes. Theo came home crying because he had only received a second-hand toy car that I had bought at the flea market. "Mom, why didn't Santa bring me what I asked for?" he asked me with those little eyes full of tears. That night, I cried silently while he slept. The next day, I sold my engagement ring, the only valuable memory I had of my husband, and bought him the bicycle he wanted so much. When he saw it, his eyes lit up like 2 stars. "Mom, Santa did remember me," he shouted, hugging me so tight I thought he would break my ribs. That hug was worth more than 1,000 gold rings. For years, it was just him and me, against the world. When he got pneumonia at 12, I stayed up for 3 straight nights taking care of him. When he failed math in high school, I took on 2 extra jobs to pay for private tutors. When he wanted to join the school's soccer team, I spent my savings on the most expensive cleats I could find. "Someday, Mom, when I'm big and have money, I'm going to buy you a big house so you don't have to work so much," he would tell me as I tucked him in at night. At 16, Theo got his first part-time job at an auto parts store. He would come home proud, showing me his first paycheck. "Look, Mom, now I can help with the bills too," he would say, handing me half his salary. I was so proud of him. My hard-working son, my responsible son, the good man he was becoming. When he turned 18, Mr. Morris, the owner of the hardware store where I bought materials for my small weekend plumbing jobs, started courting me. He was a good man, a widower like me, with 2 grown children living in the United States. He would invite me to dinner, bring me flowers, treat me like a queen. For the first time in years, I felt like a woman again, not just a mother. "Beatrice, I'd like to ask you to be my wife," Mr. Morris told me one Sunday afternoon after the church service. He held a simple but beautiful ring in his trembling hands. "I know you have Theo, but he's a man now. We could be happy together, build a family." My heart leaped with joy. After so many years of loneliness, someone was offering me love. But when I got home and told Theo, his reaction made my blood run cold. "How can you think of marrying another man?" he shouted with a fury I had never seen in him. "My dad has only been dead for 10 years. It's disrespectful. That old man just wants to take advantage of you." He cried like he did when he was a child, clinging to my skirt, begging me not to abandon him. "Son, Mr. Morris is a good man. I have a right to be happy too," I tried to explain. But Theo became hysterical. "No, Mom, you promised me we would always be together. If you marry him, I'll leave home and you'll never see me again. Choose between him and me." That ultimatum broke me in 2. My son or my happiness. The next day, with a broken heart, I went to the hardware store to find Mr. Morris. "I'm so sorry, but I can't marry you," I said, returning the ring. He looked at me with sadness but with understanding. "It's because of Theo, isn't it?" he whispered. I just nodded, with tears in my eyes. "That boy doesn't understand yet that you have a right to a life too, Beatrice. Someday, he's going to regret taking this chance away from you." The years passed and Theo stayed with me. But something had changed in our relationship. He was no longer the affectionate boy who hugged me. He had become possessive, controlling. He criticized everything I did, from the food I cooked to the clothes I wore. "Mom, you're too old to wear that color lipstick," he would say. "Mom, that skirt looks ridiculous on you at your age." Little by little, without realizing it, I had started to lose my identity. When he met Megan 5 years ago, I thought things would change. Finally, my son would have someone else in his life, and I could get a little freedom back. Megan seemed so sweet at first. "Oh, Mama Beatrice, your cooking is delicious," she would say, tasting my pot roast. "Mama Beatrice, you have to teach me how to make that amazing apple pie." She made me feel useful, needed. But in the first few months after they got married, I noticed subtle changes. Megan started making comments about my house. "Oh, Mom, this living room is so outdated." Theo and I were looking at some more modern decorations in magazines, or about my clothes. "Mom, don't you think it would be good to update your wardrobe? Ladies your age don't wear such bright colors anymore." Theo backed her up on everything. If he used to defend my decisions, now he always agreed with Megan. "Yeah, Mom, Megan's right. You should modernize a little." I tried to please them, to change what they wanted, but it was never enough. There was always something more to criticize, something more to improve. Last year, when I had a heart condition and had to be hospitalized for a week, I thought they would finally show the love they claimed to feel for me. But Theo only visited me twice, always accompanied by Megan, and they never stayed for more than 20 minutes. "We have a lot of work, Mom," he would justify. "You know the business can't be neglected. When I left the hospital, weak and scared, I hoped they would take care of me a little. But Megan told me, 'Mom, we can't be coming over all the time to look after you. You have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You're a big girl now. You can't depend on us for everything.'" Her words hurt more than the surgery. That's when I started to realize that something was wrong. My son, the boy for whom I had sacrificed everything, no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as a burden, as an obstacle on his path to happiness. Megan had achieved what she wanted, to drive Theo away from me, to turn him into her ally against his own mother. But I still clung to the hope that it was all temporary. When they have children, they'll understand what a mother's love is, I would tell myself. When they become parents, they'll value everything I did for them. How naive I was. Megan's pregnancy hadn't softened them. It had made them greedier, crueler. Now, lying in my bed with a broken arm and a shattered heart, I understood that my son was lost forever, that the sweet boy I had raised had died, and in his place was this man who saw me as a source of money. The Theo who hugged me when he had nightmares no longer existed. In his place was a stranger who threatened me and allowed his wife to beat me. "Forgive me, son," I murmured in the darkness. "Forgive me for loving you so much that I didn't see what you were becoming. Forgive me for not setting boundaries when I should have. But most of all, forgive me for what I'm going to do tomorrow." At 6 in the morning, I got out of bed without having slept for an hour. My arm hurt horribly, but there was something stronger than physical pain running through my veins. Determination. I went to the kitchen and put water on to boil for my chamomile tea. I needed to think clearly, to plan every move of this day that would change everything forever. While I waited for the water to boil, I took the winning lottery ticket I had bought 5 days ago out of my purse. $20 I had set aside from my pension, the last I had left after paying the electricity and water bills. If I win anything, even $100, I'll buy myself some new arthritis medicine, I had thought as I chose the numbers. The birthday numbers of my late husband, Theo's date of birth, the day we got married. I never imagined those numbers would give me $4 million. When I saw the result on the evening news, I had to sit on the floor from the shock. I checked the ticket 10 times before convincing myself it was real. I cried with joy, thinking about all I could do. A more comfortable house, a trip I had always dreamed of, helping Theo with his future, securing my future grandchild's college education. My first instinct had been to call Theo to share the news. "Son, you're not going to believe what happened," I shouted into the phone that night, almost breathless. "We won the lottery, $4 million. On the other end of the line, there was a strange silence. Then I heard Megan screaming with excitement in the background. "Theo, tell her to come over here right now. We have to celebrate." That same night, they arrived at my house with a bottle of cheap champagne and a smile that I now understand was not of joy, but of greed. "Mom, I can't believe we won so much money," Theo said, hugging me tighter than he had in years. Megan cried with emotion, stroking my hand with a sweetness that seemed strange to me, but which I attributed to the shock of the moment. "Mama Beatrice, you're not going to have to worry about anything ever again," Megan told me as she uncorked the champagne. "With that money, we're all going to be happy. We can buy a big house for the 3 of us, a business for Theo, everything we've ever dreamed of. I listened to her, excited, thinking that we would finally have the united family I had always wanted. But the next morning, when I woke up with a hangover from the champagne, I found Theo and Megan sitting at my kitchen table with papers spread out and calculators. "Good morning, Mom," Theo greeted me without looking up from the numbers he was writing. "Megan and I were up all night doing the math. We've already got everything planned for the money." I poured myself a coffee and sat down with them, curious to hear their ideas. "Look, Mom," Theo showed me a sheet full of numbers. "With $4 million, we can buy that house in Green Hills that costs $1.2 million. Then we invest $2 million in the auto parts business I always wanted to start. And with the remaining $800,000, we set up a savings account for the baby." "And for me?" I asked naively. Megan and Theo looked at each other as if I had said something foolish. "Oh, Mama Beatrice, you're going to live with us in the new house. You'll have your own bedroom, your own bathroom, everything you need. What do you need separate money for?" Megan replied with that fake smile I was beginning to know. "But honey, I want to maintain my independence. Maybe buy myself a small house near you, take care of some health problems I have pending," I explained, trying to sound reasonable. Theo dropped the calculator on the table with a thud. "Mom, don't be selfish. This money is a blessing for the whole family, not just for you." "Theo, I bought the ticket. I won the money. Of course I want to share it with you, but I also have my own plans," I replied, feeling a strange tension in the air. Megan stood up from the table abruptly, her face transforming into a mask of irritation I hadn't seen before. "Beatrice, you don't understand?" Megan exclaimed, in a voice that made my blood run cold. "We're young. We have our whole lives ahead of us. You've already lived your best years. This money is our chance to be happy." Her words hit me like slaps. Theo didn't contradict her. He just nodded his head, supporting every word his wife said. "Look, Mom," Theo took my hand with that fake sweetness he had learned from Megan. "You're already 69 years old. You've enjoyed life, you raised your son, you've fulfilled your purpose. Now it's our turn. Megan is pregnant. We need to secure our son's future. Don't you think that's more important than your old lady whims?" His words cut me like knives. Old lady whims? Was wanting to maintain a little dignity in my final years a whim? Did winning that money with my own $20 not give me the right to decide how to use it? "Theo, son, I can give you half. $2 million is more than enough to start a new life." Megan erupted like a volcano. "We don't want half. We want everything. My son is going to grow up in a rich family, not waiting for the crumbs his stingy grandmother gives us." She approached me, her eyes gleaming with rage. "You've had your chance to be happy. You had your marriage, your son, your house. Now it's my turn to have all that." "Megan, please, calm down." I tried to reason with her, but Theo immediately took her side. "No, Mom. Megan's right. You don't understand what it means to be starting a family these days. Everything is so expensive. The house, the food, education, healthcare. With $4 million, we can ensure our son has a future without hardship. And what about me? Am I going to live like a beggar in your new house, depending on what you give me?" I asked, my voice breaking. Theo's expression hardened in a way that scared me. "Mom, you lived your life. You had your house, your marriage, your independence. You raised your son. Now it's time for you to let us live ours." It was in that moment that I understood it had all been an act. The smiles, the hugs, the sweet words from the night before. It had all been a performance to soften me up, to make me hand over my money without resistance. Theo and Megan didn't see me as family. They saw me as an obstacle between them and the $4 million. "I'm not signing any papers," I told them, getting up from the table. "That money is mine, and I'm going to use it as I see fit. I can help you, but I'm not giving you everything." Megan shot up like a spring, her face contorted with rage. "You selfish old woman! After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me?" I repeated in disbelief. "When have you ever done anything for me? When I was in the hospital and you only visited me twice. When I needed help carrying groceries and you told me you were too busy. When I turned 69 and you completely forgot my birthday?" Theo approached me with a coldness that terrified me. "Mom, this isn't a negotiation. Either you give us that money the easy way, or you're going to have to give it to us the hard way." His threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Megan smiled wickedly, stroking her belly as if it were a war trophy. "Are you threatening me, Theo?" I asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. My own son, the reason for my existence for 32 years, was threatening me for money. "It's not a threat, Mom. It's a reality. That money is going to be ours, whether you like it or not." That afternoon, after they left with the promise of returning the next day with the bank papers, I sat in my kitchen trying to process what had happened. The boy I had raised with so much love, the son for whom I had given up my own happiness, was blackmailing me. The daughter-in-law who had called me Mom with such affection was now screaming and threatening me. I took an old notebook from the kitchen drawer and started writing. Names, dates, conversations. Everything that had happened since I won the lottery. Every cruel word, every threat, every gesture of contempt. If they were going to play dirty, I also knew how to protect myself. At 69, I had learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to be smarter than your enemies. Tomorrow they're going to find out that their mother isn't the foolish old woman they think she is. I murmured as I wrote the last line in my notebook. The chamomile tea had gone cold, but my determination burned like fire in my chest. After they left yesterday with their threats, I sat in my kitchen until it got dark, trying to understand how I had reached this point. The silence of my house weighed on me like a tombstone. For the first time in 69 years, I felt completely alone in the world. I had no siblings, my parents had died years ago, and the few friends I had left lived far away or were too sick to help me. I got up and walked through the house, seeing every corner with new eyes. This house, which I had bought with my husband's life insurance, where I had raised Theo, where I had dreamed of growing old in peace, now felt like a prison. Every photograph of Theo on the walls looked at me as if accusing me of something. The smiling 5-year-old boy, the proud teenager at his graduation, the young man at his wedding with Megan. At what point had he become my enemy? I went to my bedroom and pulled a shoebox from the back of the closet. Inside, I kept all the receipts, bills, and important documents from the last few years. I started to go through them one by one, looking for patterns, looking for clues as to when this betrayal had really begun. And there it was, in black and white, the story of my own naivety. The hospital receipts from last year, when I had heart surgery. All the bills were in my name. I had paid for everything with my savings and my health insurance. But Theo had told everyone that he had paid for my operation. Megan had even bragged on Facebook that they had spent their savings to save my life. Lie after lie, building their image as sacrificial children. I kept looking and found more evidence of their deception. The electricity, water, and gas bills for the house, always paid by me, never by them. But whenever someone asked, Theo would say that he was supporting his elderly mother, the grocery bills, the medicines, even the minor repairs to the house, all paid with my pension and my small savings. I also found copies of the loans I had given them over the last 2 years. $3,000 when Theo lost his job the year before last. $5,000 when Megan needed fertility treatments. $2,000 for the down payment on their car. They had never paid me back a single cent. Every time I mentioned it, they would change the subject or make me feel guilty for asking my own family for money. But what hurt the most to find was the will I had made 3 years ago, when I was diagnosed with the heart condition. In it, I left everything to Theo and Megan, the house, my few savings, even my grandmother's jewelry. I had done it thinking that they would take care of me in my final years, that I would die surrounded by love. How foolish I had been. I sat on the bed with all those papers scattered around me and started connecting the dots. The increasingly infrequent visits, the constant excuses for not accompanying me to the doctor, the comments about how expensive life was, the hints about how big my house was for just one person. It had all been part of a plan to make me feel guilty, to soften me up, to prepare me for this moment. I remembered the conversation I had accidentally overheard 2 months ago, when they came to visit and thought I was asleep in my armchair. As soon as the old lady dies, we'll sell this house, and with that cash plus whatever she has saved, we can buy something better in the Heights, Megan had said. We just have to be patient. She can't last much longer, Theo had replied, laughing. That night I had pretended I hadn't heard anything, that I had been sound asleep. But their words had been seared into my memory like a branding iron. They were waiting for me to die to inherit my things. And now that I had won the lottery, they didn't want to wait anymore. They wanted the money now, while I was alive, so they could enjoy it. I got out of bed with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I went to the kitchen and took out my notebook where I had started to write down everything that had happened since I won the lottery. I wrote down every detail I could remember: the dates, the exact conversations, the witnesses who might have been present. If they were going to play dirty, I needed ammunition. I wrote about the first visit when they brought me the pre-prepared bank papers, as if it were a foregone conclusion that I would sign. I wrote about Megan's exact words when she screamed that I had already lived my life. I wrote about Theo's coldness when he told me it was my obligation to give them everything. And, of course, I wrote about the moment when Megan twisted my arm until it broke. Then I went to the living room and dialed the number of my neighbor, Sharon, the only person in the world who had shown me genuine affection in recent months. "Sharon, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I need to ask you a very big favor," I said when she answered the phone. "Could you come over to my house for a moment? It's very important." Sharon arrived in less than 10 minutes, worried by my voice. She was a 50-year-old divorced woman who had moved into the house next door 6 months ago. We had developed a friendship based on afternoon cups of coffee and conversations about life. She had witnessed several of Theo and Megan's aggressive visits. "Beatrice, what happened to your arm?" she asked as soon as she saw the cast. I had made up an excuse about a fall when the neighbors asked, but with Sharon I decided to be honest. "Megan broke it because I refused to give them all the money I won in the lottery," I said bluntly. Sharon froze. "What do you mean she broke it? Your daughter-in-law hit you?" she asked in disbelief. I told her everything: the threats, the screaming, the physical violence, the plan to force me to go to the bank the next day. Sharon listened with growing horror in her eyes. "Beatrice, you have to call the police right now," she said, taking my good hand. "This is domestic violence. They can't force you to give them your money by beating you." But I shook my head. "No, Sharon, the police won't believe an old woman over her own son. Theo is very convincing when he wants to be. He'll say I fell, that I'm confused because of my age, that I'm making things up. Then what are you going to do?" Sharon asked, with genuine concern in her voice. I looked her straight in the eye and said something I didn't even know I had in me. "I'm going to be smarter than them. I'm going to let them think they've won, and then I'm going to teach them that you don't betray a mother without consequences." I explained my initial plan to Sharon. I needed her to be a witness to my current state, to accompany me to take photographs of my injuries, to be present when Theo and Megan came tomorrow. "If something happens to me, if they hurt me more, or if I disappear, I want you to know exactly what's going on," I told her. Sharon agreed to help me without hesitation. We took pictures of my broken arm, the bruises Megan had left on my neck, the marks on my face where she had slapped me. "This is evidence, Beatrice," she told me as she took the photos with her phone. "Even if you don't go to the police now, these photos can be useful later." That night, after Sharon left, I stayed up making lists. A list of all the unpaid loans. A list of all the lies they had told about me. A list of all the times they had humiliated or despised me. But I also made another list, the list of my real resources. I had the winning ticket stored in my safe deposit box at the bank. I had the house in my name. I had my pension secured. I had some small savings in different accounts. And I had something they didn't expect. The experience of a woman who had survived 69 years of life, including the death of her husband, raising a son alone, and years of hard work. But above all, I had the clarity of someone who had finally seen the truth. Theo and Megan didn't love me. They had probably never loved me. They had only tolerated me as long as I was useful, as long as I gave them money, as long as I promised them an inheritance. Now that real money was at stake, they had shown their true colors. "Tomorrow I'm going to act like the scared old woman they expect me to be," I said to myself as I prepared for another sleepless night. "I'm going to let them think I've broken, that they're going to get what they want. But in the meantime, I'm going to make my moves in secret. And when they least expect it, they're going to find out they underestimated the wrong woman." For the first time in days, I smiled. It wasn't a smile of happiness, but of determination. It was the smile of a woman who had decided to fight for her dignity, no matter the cost. At 7 in the morning, I was dressed and ready. I had been up all night, but my mind had never been clearer. I put on my best dress, the black one I wore for important occasions, and carefully applied makeup to hide the dark circles and bruises. I needed to look presentable for what was coming. I ate breakfast slowly, savoring each sip of coffee as if it were my last. At 8:30, the doorbell rang. It was Sharon who had come as we had agreed to witness everything that happened. "Are you sure about this, Beatrice?" she asked me one last time. "Completely sure," I replied with a calm that surprised even myself. At 9 o'clock, Theo and Megan arrived. They were elegantly dressed, as if they were going to a celebration instead of an extortion. Megan was wearing an expensive dress I had never seen on her, probably bought in anticipation of the money they were going to steal. Theo was carrying a leather briefcase and a fake smile that turned my stomach. "Good morning, Mom," Theo greeted me, kissing my cheek as if nothing had happened. "You're ready to go to the bank." Megan hugged me with that feigned sweetness I already knew. "Oh, Mama Beatrice, I'm so glad you came to your senses. You'll see, everything will turn out perfectly." "Yes, children, I understand now that you're right." I lied with the most submissive voice I could muster. "I'm too old to handle so much money. It's better if you take care of everything." I saw them exchange a look of complicity, believing they had won. Megan even smiled with the satisfaction of someone who believes they have broken their victim. On the way to the bank, Theo drove, whistling a cheerful song. Megan talked excitedly about their plans for the money. "First, we'll buy the house in Green Hills, then the business, then a new car for Theo." I listened in silence from the back seat, mentally recording every word to use later as evidence of their true intentions. When we arrived at the bank, Theo took some pre-prepared papers from his briefcase. They were documents for the complete transfer of the $4 million to his personal account. "You just have to sign here, Mom, and it's all settled," he said, pointing to the lines marked in yellow. "Can I read the papers before I sign?" I asked, feigning confusion. Megan immediately grew impatient. "Oh, Mom, they're just legal formalities. Theo has already reviewed everything. Just sign where it's marked." But I insisted on reading every line, taking my time, making them wait. I wanted the exact time I had planned to arrive. When the clock struck 10:30, I told the bank executive that I needed to speak with him in private before signing. "I just have some questions about the process," I explained. Theo and Megan got nervous. "Mom, there's nothing to discuss. Everything is in order," Theo insisted. "Sir?" I said to the executive, "I need to verify something in my account before making any transfer." The employee politely agreed and escorted me to a private office. Theo and Megan were left in the waiting area, clearly anxious but unable to do anything to stop me. Once in the private office, I explained the real situation to the executive. "These people are threatening and pressuring me to transfer all my money to them. Yesterday, my daughter-in-law fractured my arm because I refused." I showed him the cast and the photographs Sharon had taken the night before. The executive was horrified. "Ma'am, this is very serious. Do you want us to call the police?" I shook my head. "Not yet. But I need to protect my money immediately. I want to make some preventive transfers before they suspect anything." In the next 20 minutes, we worked quickly. I transferred $3.5 million to a new account at another bank, an account that only I knew about. I left $500,000 in the original account so they wouldn't suspect anything immediately. I also activated all possible security alerts and set up a secret code for any future transactions. Furthermore, I told the executive, "I want it registered in the system that any attempt to access my account by those people must be immediately reported to the police. I have evidence that they are extorting me." The executive took note of everything and assured me that my money was protected. When I returned to the waiting area, Theo and Megan looked at me expectantly. "Everything okay, Mom?" Theo asked, with poorly disguised impatience. "Yes, son. I just wanted to make sure I understood the process," I replied with my best confused old lady act. We sat down again at the executive's desk. Theo placed the papers in front of me again. "Well, Mom, now you can sign in peace," he said. I took the pen with a trembling hand, as if I were nervous. Megan watched me with eyes glittering with greed. Before I sign, I said to the executive, "Could you confirm the current balance of my account?" The employee checked his computer and replied, $500,000, ma'am. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Theo's face slowly transformed from expectation to confusion. "What do you mean, 500,000? Megan stammered. "It's supposed to be 4 million. The executive checked his screen again. "No, ma'am. In this account, there is $500,000. Perhaps the lady has the money distributed in different accounts." Theo looked at me, his eyes bloodshot. "Mom, where is the rest of the money?" I feigned confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about, children. The gentleman says I have $500,000. That's what their island." Megan shot up from her chair like a spring. "You moved the money!" She screamed at me in the middle of the bank. "You're deceiving us!" Her scream drew the attention of other customers and employees. The executive immediately called for security. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down, or we will have to ask you to leave." "Mom," Theo grabbed my good arm forcefully. "Tell me right now where the rest of the money island." His grip was so tight it hurt, but I maintained my expression of innocent confusion. "Theo, you're hurting me. I don't know what money you're talking about." The bank's security guard approached our table. "Is there a problem here?" the guard asked. Megan was hysterical. "This old woman is robbing us. That money belongs to the family. She has no right to hide it." Her shouts echoed throughout the bank. "Folks," the executive intervened, "you're going to have to leave immediately, or we will call the police." Theo understood that they had lost control of the situation. He let go of my arm and tried to calm down. "Fine, we're leaving. But this isn't over, Mom." As they gathered their useless papers, I remained seated, pretending to be scared and confused. Did I do something wrong? I asked the executive in a trembling voice. "No, ma'am, you did nothing wrong. Your money is safe." Theo and Megan stormed out of the bank. I watched them through the window, arguing heatedly in the parking lot. Megan gestured furiously, and Theo ran his hands through his hair in desperation. They had arrived believing they would leave as millionaires and were leaving empty-handed. I waited 15 minutes before leaving the bank. When I reached the street, I took a taxi home. During the ride, I smiled for the first time in days. The first part of my plan had worked perfectly. Theo and Megan had shown their true colors in front of witnesses, and my money was safe. Now comes the hard part, I thought, as the taxi approached my house. Now comes the revenge. I got home before noon, knowing that Theo and Megan wouldn't be long. The failure at the bank had infuriated them, but it had also made them desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and I was counting on that. I sat in my armchair to wait, with my phone within reach in case I needed to call Sharon or the police. I didn't have to wait long. At 1 in the afternoon, I heard the engine of Theo's car screech to a halt outside. His footsteps in the yard sounded like hammer blows. This time they didn't knock. Theo used his copy of the key to get in, something he had asked for years ago for emergencies. "Mom, come out from wherever you are," he roared from the entrance. Megan followed, her heels hammering my floor as if she wanted to break it. When they saw me sitting calmly in my armchair, their faces contorted with rage. "Where is our money?" Megan screamed, planting herself in front of me with her arms akimbo. "What money, dear?" I replied with the same feigned innocence I had used at the bank. "My account has $500,000. The man at the bank confirmed it. Theo paced my living room like a caged lion, running his hands through his hair. "Don't take me for an idiot, Mom. You moved that money to another account." "Theo, I don't know how to do those computer and bank things," I lied sweetly. "If the money isn't there, maybe those hackers they talk about on the news stole it." Megan got so close to me I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the sweat of her anger. "You lying old hag," she spat in my face. "We know you moved that money, and you're going to give it back right now." She was about to grab my fractured arm again, but I quickly got up from the armchair. "Megan, don't touch me. It already hurt a lot when you broke my arm." Theo stopped dead in his tracks. "What do you mean she broke your arm? You said you fell in the bathroom." I realized I had made a mistake by revealing the truth, but I decided to use it to my advantage. "Yes, I fell because Megan pushed me when I told her I wasn't going to sign the papers." "That's a lie," Megan shouted, but her red face betrayed her. Theo looked at her with a strange expression. For a moment, I thought my son might remember some humanity, that maybe he would realize what he was doing, but his response completely shattered my heart. "I don't care if she pushed you, Mom. You brought it on yourself for being stubborn," he said with a coldness that chilled my blood. "The only thing I care about is you telling us where you hid our money." In that moment, I knew I had lost my son forever. The boy I had raised was dead, and in his place was this cruel stranger. "If you don't tell us where the money is, we're going to make your life impossible," Megan threatened, approaching again. "We're going to come every day until you talk. We're going to make your last years a living hell until you give us what's ours." Her threat didn't scare me. On the contrary, it reassured me to know that I no longer had to pretend to love them. "Do whatever you want," I told them with a calmness that threw them off. "I don't have any more money than the $500,000 you saw at the bank." Theo approached me with his fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he was going to hit me, but he restrained himself. He knew the neighbors might hear. "Fine, Mom, we'll do this the hard way," he said through gritted teeth. "We're going to sue you for everything you owe us. The loans you never paid back, the money we spent taking care of you when you were sick, everything." He took his phone out of his pocket and started dialing. "I'm calling a lawyer right now." "Perfect," I replied, unfazed. "You can also call the police if you want. I have a lot of things to tell them about you." My calm was driving them crazy. They expected to find a scared old woman begging for forgiveness, not a serene woman who wouldn't be intimidated. Megan started rummaging through my house as if it were hers. She opened drawers, moved papers, looked for something that would give her clues about where I had hidden the money. "There has to be something here," she shouted as she threw my things on the floor. "No stupid old woman can be smart enough to hide $4 million. "Megan, stop touching my things," I said firmly. But she continued to destroy my living room, throwing books, moving furniture, looking for documents. Theo didn't stop her. On the contrary, he joined the search, going through my desk, opening private letters. That's when they found my notebook, where I had been writing down everything they had done to me. Theo read it aloud sarcastically. Megan screamed at me that I had already lived my life. Theo said it was my obligation to give them the money. Megan twisted my arm until it broke. He laughed as if it were a joke. "Look at this," Megan exclaimed, snatching the notebook from him. "The crazy old lady is writing lies about us. This is what she's going to use to poison the neighbors against us." She tore the notebook into pieces and threw them on the floor. They didn't know I had copies of everything saved at Sharon's house. "We're leaving now, Mom," Theo said, picking up the pieces of paper. "But we'll be back tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until you tell us the truth." They headed for the door, but before leaving, Megan turned to me with a malevolent smile. "Oh, and Beatrice, we forgot to tell you," Megan said with false sweetness. "We already posted pictures on Facebook telling the whole family that you won the lottery but are playing dumb so you don't have to share with anyone. Let's see if your little friends in the neighborhood still talk to you when they find out you're a stingy old woman." They left, leaving my house a mess, and me with a broken heart but with a clearer mind than ever. I picked up the pieces of my notebook from the floor and put them in a bag. Even torn, it was still evidence of their intentions. Then I sat down to think about the next step of my plan. I took out my phone and checked Facebook for the first time in months. Sure enough, Megan had posted a picture of me with a caption that read, "My mother-in-law won $4 million in the lottery but is playing dumb to avoid helping her family. She'd rather be selfish than see her grandchild grow up in a good house. Some people change when they have money." The post had dozens of comments from distant relatives and acquaintances criticizing me, calling me selfish, saying a grandmother should think of her family first. Megan had achieved what she wanted, to make me the villain of the story in everyone's eyes. But I no longer cared what people thought. I had lived 69 years trying to please others, to be the perfect mother, the ideal daughter-in-law, the kind neighbor, and it had led me to be alone, hurt, and betrayed by the people I loved most. "Let them think what they want," I murmured, closing the phone. "Soon, they'll know who's telling the truth and who's lying." It was time to move on to the second phase of my plan. That afternoon, I dialed the number I had saved in my address book 3 years ago, when I made my will. Attorney Benjamin Romero, a professional voice answered. Mr. Romero, this is Beatrice Herrera. I need to see you urgently. It's about a case of family extortion. We scheduled an appointment for 9 o'clock the next morning. Throughout the night, I prepared my evidence. The photographs of my injuries that Sharon had taken, the torn pieces of my notebook with the annotations, the receipts for all the loans they had never repaid, the copies of the lies they had published on social media, all meticulously organized in a folder. Mr. Romero received me in his office with the seriousness the case deserved. When I showed him the photographs of my fractured arm and explained how it had happened, his expression hardened. Mrs. Herrera, this is aggravated domestic violence. We have solid grounds to proceed legally against your daughter-in-law. Mr. Romero, I don't want to put anyone in jail, I explained. I just want to protect my money and be left in peace. But I also want them to face the consequences of what they've done. The lawyer nodded understandingly. I understand perfectly. We will use the evidence as a shield, not necessarily as a sword. I signed several documents that day. A formal complaint for assault and extortion that would be filed away but ready to be used if necessary. A temporary restraining order prohibiting them from coming near me or my property. And most importantly, a new will where I completely revoked Theo and Megan's inheritance. Mr. Romero, I want my entire estate to go to charity when I die, I said, signing the final document. To organizations that help elderly people abandoned by their families. Benjamin looked at me with respect. You are a very brave woman, Mrs. Herrera. Your son doesn't know what a gem of a mother he is losing. The next step was to visit the bank where I had transferred the $3.5 million. I needed to establish a trust that would protect my money from any future attempts at theft or manipulation. I want that when I die, this money is automatically donated to nursing homes in the city, I explained to the manager. Ma'am, are you sure? The banker asked. It's a considerable sum. Do you not have family who could benefit? I showed him the photographs of my injuries. My family has already shown what kind of benefit they seek from me. I prefer my money to help people who really need it. I returned home feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time since winning the lottery, I was in complete control of the situation. My money was protected, I had legal backing, and Theo and Megan could no longer intimidate me. Now, I just had to wait for them to get themselves into bigger trouble. I didn't have to wait long. The next day, Theo arrived at my house with 2 men I didn't recognize. One of them was carrying a briefcase and looked like a lawyer. The other seemed to be some kind of private investigator. I watched them from my window before deciding whether to open the door. When they knocked, I opened it with the chain on. Good morning, Mom. Theo greeted me with false courtesy. I've brought attorney Michael Torres, my lawyer. He's going to explain the legal rights that Megan and I have to your money as direct family. The supposed lawyer smiled at me with the confidence of someone who thinks they are going to scare an ignorant old woman. Good morning, ma'am, the man said. I'm here to inform you that, according to the laws of anticipated inheritance, you have a legal obligation to share your earnings with your direct heirs. Your son and daughter-in-law are entitled to receive 80% of what you won in the lottery. I remained silent for a moment, pretending to be scared by his words. Is that true? I asked in a trembling voice. I have to give them my money even if I don't want to. The fake lawyer nodded solemnly. That's right, ma'am. It's the law. If you don't comply voluntarily, we can compel you through the courts. Well, I replied, sighing, if it's the law, then I have no other choice. Please, come in so we can discuss the details. I took off the chain and opened the door completely. Theo smiled triumphantly, believing he had finally broken my resistance. They settled in my living room while I made coffee in the kitchen. From there, I could hear them celebrating in low voices. I told you the old woman would give in as soon as we brought a lawyer, Theo whispered. These ignorant old ladies get scared by any legal word, the supposed lawyer replied. I returned with the coffee tray and sat down opposite them with my best expression of a defeated old woman. Well, Mr. Torres, what papers do I have to sign? I asked with feigned resignation. The man took some very official-looking documents from his briefcase. Ma'am, these are the mandatory transfer documents, he explained, showing me the sheets. By signing them, you comply with the law and avoid major problems with the justice system. I took the papers and began to read them carefully, feigning confusion with the legal terms. "Excuse me, Mr. Torres," I said after a few minutes. "But these papers don't have the court seal. Shouldn't they have some kind of official validation?" I saw the man get nervous. Yes, of course, but that's added later, when we present them before the judge." "And what is your bar association number?" I continued, asking innocently. "I'd like to write it down for my records." The supposed lawyer started to stammer. "It's just, I don't have it with me right now." Theo looked at him worriedly, realizing something was going wrong. I got up from the armchair slowly and went to my desk. "Let me call my own lawyer to confirm that everything is in order," I said, taking out my phone. "I want to make sure I'm complying with the law correctly." The look of panic on the fake lawyer's face confirmed what I already knew. I dialed Mr. Benjamin Romero's number and put it on speakerphone so everyone could hear. "Mr. Romero, can you confirm if there is any law of anticipated inheritance that obliges lottery winners to share with their family?" His response was clear and forceful. "Mrs. Herrera, no such law exists. No one can force you to give your money to anyone." The silence in my living room was deafening. The fake lawyer quickly gathered his papers and headed for the door. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll come back another time when I have all my documents in order." He left almost at a run, leaving Theo and the investigator standing in my living room. "Theo," I said to my son with a calmness that threw him off, "you just committed a crime. Trying to scam me with false documents and a non-existent lawyer is aggravated fraud." His face fell when he understood he had walked into a trap. "Mom, I didn't know the lawyer was fake," he stammered, trying to defend himself. "Megan found him online. We thought he was real, but I had heard enough lies." "Theo, get out of my house right now and tell Megan that if you bother me again, I will use all the evidence I have against you." They left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. They had shown they were willing to go to any extreme to steal my money. It was time for them to face the real consequences of their actions. That afternoon, I called Mr. Romero again. "Mr. Romero, it's time to activate the complaint. I now have enough evidence of their attempts at fraud and extortion." My war had officially begun. Early the next day, 2 police officers knocked on my door. They came to deliver the restraining order that Mr. Romero had arranged. "Mrs. Ana Herrera, this order prohibits your son Theo Herrera and your daughter-in-law Megan Reyes from coming within 200 yards of you or your property," the younger officer explained. "If they violate this order, they will be arrested immediately." 2 hours after the police left, my phone began to ring non-stop. It was Theo, calling again and again from different numbers. I didn't answer any of the calls, but I did record all the voicemails he left me. "Mom, answer the phone. We can work this out without lawyers or police. I don't understand why you're making this so complicated. We're family." His messages became more desperate and aggressive with each call. "Mom, this is a betrayal. After everything I did for you, you repay me with a restraining order. Cancel that piece of crap right now, or I swear you'll regret it." Each message was new evidence I could use against him if necessary. In the afternoon, Sharon came to visit me with news. "Beatrice, you're not going to believe what's happening in the neighborhood," she said, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea. "Megan is going around telling everyone that you've gone crazy, that you sued them for no reason, that you're accusing them of things that never happened." I smiled bitterly. It was exactly what I had expected. "But that's not all," Sharon continued. "I went to the supermarket this morning and ran into Mrs. Andrews, the neighbor from the corner. She told me that Theo and Megan came to her house last night, asking if she knew anything about your bank accounts or if you had mentioned where you had hidden the money." My stomach tied itself in a knot. They were investigating my neighbors, trying to find clues about my money. "What did you tell Mrs. Andrews?" I asked worriedly. "I told her I didn't know anything, but I recommended she not get involved in these family problems," Sharon replied. "But I'm worried, Beatrice. Those 2 are desperate. I don't know how far they're capable of going." That same afternoon, I found out just how far they were capable of going. I was watering my plants in the front yard when I saw an unfamiliar car parked across from my house. Inside was a man with a camera who was taking pictures of me. When he saw me watching him, he started the engine and drove off quickly. Theo and Megan had hired a private detective to watch me. Over the next few days, the surveillance intensified. Different cars, different people, but always someone watching my movements. They photographed me when I went out to get groceries, when I went to the bank, when I visited the doctor to check on my fractured arm. It was a systematic campaign of harassment designed to intimidate and pressure me. But what bothered me most was when I discovered they had contacted my doctor, the employee at the bank where I had my original account, even the young man who delivered my gas. Megan had introduced herself as my concerned daughter-in-law, telling them that I was showing signs of senile dementia and that the family was trying to protect me from making dangerous financial decisions. Mrs. Herrera, Dr. Evans, my primary care physician, called me on the phone. Your daughter-in-law came to my office yesterday asking about your mental state. She told me you're giving away money to strangers and that she's afraid someone is taking advantage of you. His call confirmed that Theo and Megan were trying to build a case to declare me mentally incompetent. Doctor, I am perfectly fine in my faculties, I replied firmly. My daughter-in-law and my son are harassing me because I refuse to give them all the money I won in the lottery. They are the ones causing me problems, not the other way around. I briefly explained the situation, and the doctor was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Herrera, would you like me to schedule a full psychological evaluation? The doctor offered. That way, we will have it officially documented that you are in full command of your mental faculties. I agreed immediately. It was exactly what I needed to protect myself from their attempts to have me declared incompetent. Meanwhile, Megan's posts on social media became more vicious every day. She no longer just accused me of being selfish with the money. Now she was inventing stories about my supposed dementia, about how I had become paranoid and aggressive, about how I had threatened my own family. Each post had dozens of comments from distant relatives expressing their concern for my mental state. My poor mother-in-law hasn't been the same since she won the lottery, Megan wrote in a post that included a picture of me taken without my permission. The money changed her completely. Now she distrusts everyone, even her own family. It's so sad to see how greed can destroy an older person. The comments were devastating to my reputation. But the final straw came when Megan posted a video of herself crying, stroking her pregnant belly. I'm so worried about my baby, she said through fake sobs. The stress of dealing with my mother-in-law's situation is affecting me a lot. I don't understand why a grandmother would choose money over the well-being of her future grandchild. We're only asking for help to give this baby a good life, but she sees us as enemies. The video went viral in our social circle. Family, friends, neighbors, even people I barely knew started contacting me to express their concern. Some suggested I seek psychological help. Others told me directly that I was being cruel to my son and daughter-in-law. It was a perfectly orchestrated smear campaign. It was then that Mr. Romero called me with alarming news. Mrs. Herrera, Theo, and Megan have just filed a civil lawsuit against you. They are accusing you of defamation and slander, and they are asking a judge to declare you mentally incompetent to manage your finances. My heart raced. They had taken the fight to the legal arena. What does that mean, Mr. Romero? I asked, trying to stay calm. It means we have to appear before a judge in 2 weeks to defend your mental competence and your right to manage your own money, he explained. But don't worry. We have solid evidence that you are perfectly sane, and we have evidence of violence and extortion against them. I couldn't sleep that night. For the first time since this war had begun, I felt real fear. Not fear of losing the money, but fear of losing my freedom. If a judge decided I was not mentally competent, they could place me under Theo's guardianship. He would have total control over my life, my money, my decisions. I would be his legal prisoner. The next day, I went to the bank where I had the $3.5 million stored. I want to make a change to the trust's instructions, I told the manager. If something happens to me, if I'm declared incompetent, or if I die under suspicious circumstances, I want all the money to be immediately donated and the reason for the donation to be made public. Ma'am, are you in danger? The manager asked, concerned. I showed him Megan's social media posts, the lawsuit documents they had filed against me, the evidence of the harassment I was suffering. I want to make sure that even if something happens to me, the truth comes out. That same day, I decided to take an action that I knew would make them desperate, but would also expose them completely. I called the local newspaper and asked to speak with a reporter. "I want to tell you the story of an old woman who won the lottery and is now being harassed by her own family," I told the journalist who took my call. The interview was published 2 days later on the front page of the newspaper. "Won $4 million and her family threatens her," the headline read. The article included photographs of my fractured arm, copies of Megan's defamatory posts, and my full testimony about the violence and harassment I had suffered. The reaction was immediate and explosive. My home phone didn't stop ringing all day. Television reporters knocked on my door. Neighbors who had believed Megan's lies came to apologize to me. But most importantly, several elderly rights organizations contacted me to offer free legal support. A national television show that specialized in cases of family abuse also called. "Mrs. Herrera, we want to invite you to tell your story on national television," the producer told me. "Your case can help other older people who are going through similar situations." I accepted immediately. But it was Theo and Megan's reaction that mattered most to me. That same night, violating the restraining order, they showed up at my house screaming like maniacs. "Mom, how could you do this to us?" Theo roared, banging on my door. "Now everyone thinks we're monsters. We're getting fired from our jobs because of your damn article." "You damn old hag," Megan screamed from the yard. "You ruined our lives. No one will hire us now. My baby is going to be born into poverty because of you." Their screams woke up all the neighbors, who came out to see what was happening. Some even took out their phones to record. I immediately called the police. "They are violating the restraining order," I reported. "They are on my property shouting threats." The officers arrived in less than 10 minutes and arrested Theo and Megan in front of all the neighbors. The images of the arrest were recorded by several witnesses and the next day were circulating all over social media. As they were being taken away in handcuffs, Theo shouted one last threat at me that was heard throughout the neighborhood. "This isn't over, Mom. We're going to take everything from you. You're going to end up in a nursing home without a dollar." His words were recorded by the reporters who had arrived following the story and appeared that same night on the television news. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly that night. Theo and Megan had shown their true colors to the whole world. They could no longer pretend to be the victims of a crazy old woman. Now everyone knew who they really were. The next day, Mr. Romero called me with excellent news. "Mrs. Herrera, after what happened last night, Theo and Megan's lawyer withdrew the lawsuit. Apparently, they no longer want this case to go to court." I smiled as I hung up the phone. They had lost their war. 3 months after the arrest, my life had found a tranquility I hadn't known for years. Theo and Megan had kept their promise not to bother me again, but not out of love or respect, but because they no longer had a choice. The media scandal had completely destroyed their reputation. Theo had lost his job at the auto parts company when his boss saw the news about his arrest. Megan had been fired from the boutique where she worked because customers refused to be served by the woman who beat up old ladies. But beyond the professional consequences, what had hit them hardest was the social rejection. Their friends had abandoned them when the truth came out. The neighbors pointed at them in the street. Even some distant relatives had posted comments on social media expressing their shame over the couple's behavior. The smear campaign that Megan had orchestrated against me had completely backfired on her. I found out from Sharon that they had to move out of their apartment because the neighbors had made them feel so uncomfortable that they could no longer live there peacefully. They say they went to live with Megan's mother in a neighborhood on the other side of the city, my neighbor told me as we drank coffee in my renovated kitchen. It seems Megan's father kicked them out of the house when he found out what they had done. I had used part of my money to completely remodel my house. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to erase any trace of the toxic presence that Theo and Megan had left in my home. I painted the walls cheerful colors, replaced the furniture where they had sat to threaten me, and bought new plants to fill my garden with life. It was like a symbolic purification of my personal space. With the $500,000 I had left in the original account, I decided to make some smart investments. I bought a small apartment in a quiet area of the city that I rented to a young, hard-working family. The rental income gave me additional financial security and provided me with the satisfaction of helping honest people who really needed a home. I also allocated $100,000 to create a fund to help elderly victims of family abuse, managed by the human rights organization that had supported me during my legal process. Your case has inspired many older people to report the abuse they suffer in their families, the organization's director told me during the donation ceremony. Your courage is saving lives. The national television program where I had told my story became one of the most watched episodes of the season. I received hundreds of letters from people who had lived through similar situations. Elderly people who had been manipulated or mistreated by their own children. Each letter confirmed that I had made the right decision by making my story public. One of the letters that moved me the most was from a 72-year-old woman from Chicago, Mrs. Herrera. After watching your program, I had the courage to report my son, who was stealing my pension and threatening to put me in a nursing home if I didn't give him all my money. Thanks to your example, I am now free and at peace. God bless you for your strength. Those words were worth more than all the millions in the world. 6 months after the scandal, I ran into Megan at the supermarket. It was inevitable. She was in the checkout line when I arrived with my cart. Her pregnancy was very advanced, but she looked gaunt, tired, very different from the haughty woman I had known. When she saw me, she immediately lowered her head as if wanting to become invisible. For a moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been pity, but I quickly remembered the sound of my arm breaking in her hands and the feeling disappeared. Megan, I greeted her in a neutral voice, without hostility but without warmth. She slowly looked up, her eyes full of a shame that seemed genuine. Mrs. Herrera, she murmured almost inaudibly. I wanted to apologize for everything that happened. Her voice trembled and she looked like she was about to cry. I have no excuse for what I did. I was desperate, but that doesn't justify hurting you. I looked at her for a long moment, studying her face to see if it was another one of her performances. Megan, I finally replied, an apology doesn't bring back broken trust or erase the pain caused, but I appreciate that you at least acknowledge what you did. I paid for my groceries and headed for the exit. Before I left, I turned back one last time. I hope that when your son is born, you learn what the unconditional love of a mother truly means. That night, as I watered my plants in the garden, I reflected on that encounter. I didn't feel satisfaction at seeing Megan defeated, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. There was justice in her facing the consequences of her actions. Her son would grow up knowing the truth about what his parents had done, and maybe that would make him a better person. Theo never tried to contact me directly after the arrest, but I knew from third parties that he had fallen into a deep depression. According to a distant cousin who took pity on him, he would spend entire days without getting out of bed, obsessively talking about how he had lost millions of dollars because of his selfish mother. He hadn't learned anything. He still saw himself as the victim of the story. A year after winning the lottery, I moved to a smaller but more comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood near the city center. Not because my previous house was bad, but because I wanted a completely new start. This new house had a perfect garden for my plants, a kitchen with lots of natural light, and most importantly, no painful memories within its walls. Sharon moved to the same area a few weeks after me. We had developed a solid friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. We had breakfast together on Sundays, went to the flower market on Wednesdays, and in the afternoons, we drank tea while watching soap operas. It was the family I had chosen, not the one I was given by blood. In my new house, I established a routine that filled me with peace. I woke up early to water my plants and make my coffee. I read the newspaper on my terrace while listening to the birds sing. In the afternoons, I visited the senior center where I now worked as a volunteer, helping other older adults write letters or simply listening to their stories. One afternoon, while organizing photographs in my new living room, I found a picture of Theo when he was 5 years old. He was smiling with that pure innocence that children have, hugging a stuffed animal that I had given him for his birthday. For a moment, my heart ached, remembering the sweet boy he had been before he became the cruel man he was now. But I didn't feel regret for my decisions. That boy had died a long time ago, replaced by a stranger who had chosen greed over love. I had raised the boy with all my heart, but I was not responsible for the decisions the adult had made. I put the photograph in a box, along with other memories of the past that no longer had a place in my present. 2 years after the lottery, I received an unexpected call. It was a social worker informing me that Megan had given birth to a baby girl, but that both she and Theo had been arrested for drug trafficking. The baby was in the custody of the state, and they needed to contact relatives to evaluate care options. Mrs. Herrera, according to our records, you are the child's paternal grandmother, the social worker explained. Would you be willing to consider taking temporary custody of the child while we resolve the parent's legal situation? The question hit me like a lightning bolt. An innocent baby, my granddaughter, with no fault for her parents' mistakes. I couldn't sleep that night, struggling with the most difficult decision of my life. On one hand, the child was my blood, my only real remaining family. On the other hand, agreeing to care for her would mean reconnecting with Theo and Megan in some way. After much reflection, I made a decision that surprised even myself. The next day, I called the social worker. I accept to take care of the child, I told her, but under my conditions. I want full and permanent custody. If Theo and Megan get out of prison, I don't want them to have any rights to the baby until they prove they are completely rehabilitated. It was my chance to break the cycle of toxicity in my family. The baby, whom I named Hope, came to my house when she was 3 months old. She was beautiful, with the big eyes of the Herrera family, but with a sweetness that neither of her parents had. From the moment I held her in my arms, I knew I had made the right decision. This baby would grow up surrounded by real love, not manipulation or blackmail. I used part of my money to turn one of the rooms into a perfect nursery for Hope. I hired a trusted nanny to help me during the day, as at my 71 years, I needed support to care for a baby. But the nights were just ours, when I would feed her a bottle while singing the same lullabies I had sung to her father decades ago. Hope gave me back something I thought was lost forever, the joy of being needed for the right reasons. She didn't need me for my money or for what I could give her materially. She needed me for love, for care, for the security that only a grandmother can provide. It was a pure love, with no hidden agenda or selfish motivations. One afternoon, while Hope slept in my lap and I rocked in the chair in my flower-filled garden, I reflected on the strange path my life had taken. I had lost a son, but gained a granddaughter. I had lost money, but gained peace. I had lost the family I thought I had, but found the family I truly deserved. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Mr. Romero with news about Theo and Megan. Mrs. Herrera, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Theo wants to talk to you. He says he wants to apologize and ask you to visit him in jail. I looked at Hope sleeping peacefully in my arms, and my answer was immediate. Mr. Romero, tell him that when he gets out of prison, if he has truly changed, if he has learned what love and respect mean, then we can talk about meeting his daughter, but not before. This child is not going to grow up visiting prisons or knowing parents who don't know how to love her. It was my final decision on the matter. That night, after putting Hope to bed in her crib, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea. The house was silent, but it was a silence full of peace, not loneliness. For the first time in years, I was not afraid of the future. I had a clear purpose: to raise this child to be strong, independent, and capable of recognizing true love from false. The $4 million I had won in the lottery had cost me a son, but it had given me something much more valuable: the freedom to live without fear, the dignity to make my own decisions, and the opportunity to create a new family based on real love. Hope would grow up knowing that money doesn't buy happiness, but that honesty and self-respect are priceless. I closed my eyes and smiled, feeling for the first time in a long time that I had won the most important lottery of all, the lottery of inner peace. My war was over, and I had emerged victorious not by destroying my enemies, but by building a new life full of purpose and genuine love. Good night, Hope, I murmured, directing my words to the room where my granddaughter slept. Tomorrow will be a beautiful day for us. And for the first time in years, I really believed it.